Okay, everyone. The time is 5:32, and we are here today, Tuesday, April 13th, for the regular session of the City Council. There is a quorum present, so I call the meeting to order. We are going to move directly into work session. Is there any items on the agenda that anybody would like to discuss? Councilmember John.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to go ahead and pull, consent item D, E, and F for discussion.
D, E, and F?
Yes.
So, you want to ask questions on those? Okay. Welcome. Okay. So we've got Kent and is this Steve? So ask your questions.
Thank you, Mayor. This is actually, the DNA is similar in the question as to when we actually put it out for proposal for bids. How was it done, and was it also put out for the local community to be able to put a bid? And do we get any local bids?
Can you hear me? Okay.
You can now. It's like it.
Yeah. Okay. Kent Collins. I'm the Director of Public Works. Also Steve Shore, who's our facilities manager. The way we bid out any contract, it's an open bidding process. Purchasing actually bids all of our solicitations on an online bid platform called BidSync, but they also advertise those bids in the official local newspaper. So anyone who is a local contractor who would be interested in bidding, with the city would be watching the local newspaper, and they are advertised in the local newspaper. I do not know. I know we got 13 bids for the janitorial services contract. I don't know if any of them were local from Coppell. So I do know that the company that we use is local to the Metroplex.
Okay. Well, yeah, I was just asking that question because obviously we want to promote local businesses, support local business as well, and I wasn't sure if they actually had been notified sufficiently to be able to put the bid in time and so forth. So those are the two questions I have for D and E. But can I go to move on to F, Mayor?
Go ahead.
Okay. For item F, for the janitorial service, it looked like we had 4 options to renew. And I was just wondering what the terms of the option to renew were, because it seemed like there's about, $45,000 difference from the previous year?
Okay, the terms or the price stays the same as what they've offered all along. The reason that it's gone up is because we did add some new buildings this year, and we also added an additional day porter because of COVID protocols. And that's what's accounted for the increase in the price.
Okay, so the option was the same, it's just that we had added the additional.
Yes.
And so would that be the same for the remaining two options as well?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, yes, it would be. There's no language that allows for renegotiation of that basic per square foot of clean space price. And in fact, this will likely be the last year that we move forward with this particular contractor. We have the ability to renew 2 more times under the terms of the existing contract, but we'll have time to prepare to go out for the next year potentially.
Which I noticed that there was a comment about possibly seeking additional proposal for after this one.
Yes.
Was there a particular reason why we are looking into that, or is it just being cost efficient?
Just usually on the janitorial, even though the contract was for 5, purchasing and myself both, we like to look at it again after 3 years because of the costs going up and down and the additional items that we've added. And also, we may look at something like currently the part of the janitorial bid is that they supply the chemicals, and we are going to look at, compare that to if we supply the chemicals, if that would save the city money or if it would incur additional costs. So that's one of the reasons we mainly want to look.
Thank you. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the agenda? Seeing none. Item B, discussion regarding homestead exemption. John.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. First of all, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about the homestead exemption. I know the last time we had a discussion, it was January 29th during the winter retreat. We had a very brief discussion about the homestead exemption. And at that time, I appreciated everybody's input as to what's been going on with the homestead exemption. And I learned at that time that the topic, this homestead exemption, was discussed every year. In fact, I think it was mentioned that more than 10 plus years that has been discussed every year. And I also heard that the raising homestead exemption will have a very small impact on the citizens' pocket. And also mentioned that it will have an impact on the city budget, which, all of these things are true. But at the same time, what I also heard at that time was that the city manager, as a city council, we have never given a direction to look into this matter to see if there is viable options or what options are available for homestead exemption, increasing it. So, it's true. Everything we do for the project is going to impact our budget. That's true, but if we don't actually give the direction for the city managers to look into it and see what are available, even though it might be small, then all we're doing is just talking, but we're not actually having the means to look into it and discuss effectively and to decide whether it's actually needed or not, or what could be done with that. So that's the reason I'm asking this council. Let's at least give our city manager the directions to really look into the homestead exemption and see what options are available to have an impact for the citizens.
As a matter of course, when we look at this on an annual basis, we do look at the actual numbers, and we look at data that shows what other cities are doing and what we are doing, and we actually show what the calculations and the analysis of what actually it does to our budget. So if you got the impression that no analysis has been done over all of these years, as a matter of fact, I believe that day we had a sheet that had all of the information in it. So for some of us, we have looked at that information year over year, and so it didn't really take much explanation. But it is one of those things that we specifically took a vote and decided that this year was not the year to do that. Councilmember or Gary, we're in work session. Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor and Council Member John. I appreciate you bringing this up right now while we're in the middle of an election season. I think because every election season this comes up, and I'm always a little concerned that so much of the stuff that we talk about when we look at this every year doesn't get brought up during the election season. I'll give you just a few examples. I often hear that the reason we need to do this is we need to get 20% for the elderly and disabled and people on a fixed income. And obviously, raising the exemption or lowering taxes is kind of mom and apple pie and Memorial Day. Everybody's for it, but it's a matter of how you get there. The reality is when we talk about our fixed income, elderly, and disabled, we have a program for that. We offer an exemption. The information the mayor was just talking about, we got, and our exemption, I think, out of the 31 cities in Dallas County is the fourth best. And at $75,000 for the average home in Coppell of $400,000, that's a 19% exemption. So we're right at 20. Maybe we need to index that to make sure that as house appraisals continue to go up, that it goes up. But I would think that if someone's on a fixed income, they may not be at a $400,000 house, and so actually having it be a dollar amount helps the individuals that are at a smaller. If you're at a $300,000 house, as an example, it's a 25% exemption. So I think that's important for the public to understand. I also hear during elections that we don't compare well to other cities, and like all statistics, it all depends on who's coming up with the statistics. I see us compared to Grapevine as an example. We share a border with Grapevine, but that's about all we have in common with them. Their economic model is so much different. Their tax rate is so low and their exemptions are so high because they chose years ago to base their economy on retail sales. And we could do the same, but I would tell you the input I saw from 2030 and 2040 says that our citizens don't want the Gaylord Texan in the middle of Coppell. In fact, when we talked about having regional softball tournaments at our fields, everyone said we don't want all those people coming in on the weekends. So it's a different economic model and one that frankly is challenged when the economy's bad. So if you look at us, the information the staff has given us against every other city in Dallas County, we're 14th from the top out of 31 cities, so we're right in the middle. So the perception of all the other cities have a better tax or homestead exemption than us just isn't true. I'm sorry, I'll try to be brief, but I think it's important to get facts out there. The other thing, and I've been approached with this, individuals saying, this is important. My tax bill is $12,000, my property tax bill. 15% of that is $1,800. That's $150 a month. I need y'all to pass this so that I can reduce my house payment by $150 a month. Well, the challenge is no one had ever corrected that thinking that $12,000 is not city taxes. Our city taxes are probably $2,500 or $3,000. And so if you take 15% of that, that's $400 or $450 a year. That's $35 or $38 a month. That's real money. But I'm a little afraid we have citizens that are convinced if we pass this 15% increase that their total tax bill is going down by 15%. And so I'm a little concerned that we need to communicate better and make sure they understand that. Last point, or second to last point, I hear often we need to do this for the citizens, and I get concerned that we pay attention only to those that we think are voting. I can tell you the businesses in this town get to vote too. They get to vote with their feet. And we've spent 20-something years getting the proportion of taxes paid by residents reduced from 80-something% down to 50-something%. And we've done that by attracting businesses. And if we're not careful and we send that signal that says businesses aren't important to this community, then the west side will have vacant buildings, we won't have inventory to tax, and ultimately we're going to have an issue with citizens because we're going to need them to help support the tax base like the old days. And then I guess the last thing I would say is why now? We know that either by regulation or legislation, there's a really good chance that our sales tax situation changes. And I see online where people say 15% is only $1.5 million, the city can come up with that. But when we're also maybe coming up with another 8 or 9 million, my suggestion, and I told the mayor I wouldn't say this, but I won't be around to deal with this, but my suggestion is that we wait another year and look at it and make sure that we can absorb this $9 million hit potentially before we agree that we're going to reduce revenue by another $1.5 million or $2 million. So sorry to be long-winded, but I think it's important that we have facts out. These are things we talk about regularly. We've committed every year to revisit this subject, and I think it's a serious endeavor. And I would suggest that council take another hard look at it next year when we've absorbed the sales tax hit and determine if it makes sense.
Wes?
Thank you. John and Gary, I absolutely agree with Gary's comments. We do look at this every year. We've got data going back to 2008, I believe, on the values and the exemptions. One of the things that's come clear to me anyway is the opportunity to work with our Ford board as we go forward in the future in the senior exemption area. This is what Gary was talking about. I'm very concerned about our future of our housing, and that primarily relies on our senior citizens that are a big part of that. So I think we can find something out there for the future, maybe not this year, but certainly, as Gary was saying, after we figure out where we're going to end up at the end of this year, I think there's an opportunity to provide some benefit for some of our senior citizens and our disabled to go even further past what we're currently doing. There's a lot of reasons that makes sense, especially since we're doing a fixed amount and not a percentage. The people that are probably most impacted by that are not in the $400,000 house or the $800,000 house, but the $200,000 or $250,000 house. We'll actually could be giving them a much larger incentive than if we did a flat rate. So those are all points that we need to discuss. I think they're very worthy points that we need to continue to consider. And I'm very confident that we will make the right decision, and it will be a good one.
Bijou?
Thank you, Mayor. John, the short answer is it takes 4 city council members to move forward with anything in city council here, so to approve or going forward to discuss. That's one of the reasons we discuss this. We need to have more support for homestead exemption increase. That's one of the reasons that we haven't taken any action. So the last time we took an action on homestead exemption was 19 years ago. So we are at 5% in Coppell. Other surrounding cities of 41,000 people, we are at the highest that I looked at some of the data. All other cities that we looked at is population-wise is much, much larger. So I spoke to a number of people in town, including the former mayor of Coppell, Candy Sheehan. She is a single earner, and she told me most of her friends left Coppell. She's the only one left here in Coppell. She wants to stay here. She supports increasing the homestead exemption. And I spoke to a former state representative, Bennett Ratliff, a number of years ago, and he moved out of Coppell, by the way. He was in a unique position. He had a home here and also a small business here. He told me every year when he get an appraisal from the Dallas District DCAD, his home value goes higher than his small business properties appraisal. So he was saying his home prices, his taxes goes up every year, much significantly than his small business appraisal is. And he also supports increasing the homestead exemption. And finally, I will say the most important thing, I met a person recently, last week actually. His name is Garvin. He lives in Hertz Road, right in front of San Alfonso Church, Catholic Church. He lived in Coppell for 38 years. And he sold his house 2 months ago. And he said, I asked him, why are you leaving? And he said, I can pay all my bills with $1,950 fixed Social Security check coming in. He has to pay for his medication. He has to pay for his utilities, taxes, and some of the loans remaining on his home. So he sold his house and moving out of here from Coppell. Those people contributed so much to this city, and we have to be mindful of these people. And that's what we also need to take care of these people. It's important that we talk about it. We need to take some action, and it takes 4 city council members to move forward. Thank you.
Gary, then Brianna.
And I appreciate the fact, Bijou, that you've been a champion of this. I guess my question is, I do believe we have an issue. We've had an issue since 2010 when we did the 2030 program of appraisals going up in town to the point that people can't stay. I'm not convinced that if we did this tomorrow and put $35 a month back into those individual pockets, that then that $1,900 would be enough to stay in Coppell. The problem is that the challenge is much different than just homestead exemption. And we have options. We've reduced the tax rate. The challenge is trying to reduce the overall cost of living in Coppell enough to keep up with the appraisals. And I'm concerned that if we passed homestead exemption tomorrow, folks would expect the problem to go away. And that's just not the case.
Brianna?
Very well stated, Gary. I will just say it does, you're right, it does, Bijou does take 4 votes, but by saying that, you're implying that all of us up here haven't supported trying to do something in a creative way to deal with the homestead exemption. And the reason why we can all say that we have talked about this year after year after year is because we all have been looking for opportunities to address this issue. We want everybody to stay in Coppell and live in Coppell. We're only one piece of that pie. There are some parts of people's taxes that we aren't able to control in any way, shape, or form, or our values of our homes. And our city manager, our staff has been asked year after year when we go through budget, are we missing anything? Can we do something different? We talked about it at length at retreat. I'm happy to talk about it again. If you want a vote and you're looking for 4 votes, I am happy to be one of those votes. So I guess all that to say is we've all been very supportive about it. We've been talking about it for years, and the reality is there are guardrails that are put up that are out of our control, and there's only so much that we can do. And like Gary said, even if we were to do it today and implement it, would it still fix the problem? I don't know that it would. And so how can we look for some long-term solutions? Are there opportunities? There might be. I think Mike and staff are constantly considering this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is always and always has been at the forefront of all of us sitting up here. And if I'm not speaking for you, please say so. But and that's even from councils beforehand. So I'll leave it at that.
And one thing to note is with previous councils that sometimes there were different people and sometimes they were people that were here. When we had the opportunity to lower the revenue that we were going to receive, the decision was to cut the tax rate for everybody instead of giving a homestead exemption or a senior exemption specifically. And in those cases, this conversation has been very, very similar. And when it came down to it, the decision was to lower the rate for everybody versus giving exemptions to some. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mayor. And I appreciate the comment from Councilmember Roden and also, Councilmember Mays and also, Hinojosa. But I think the main thing that you're missing is that we're not trying to find one thing that's going to fix everything. And, rightly so, if this is an issue that's coming up every election, there's probably a reason why it's coming up every year. The way I understood it at the winter retreat was that we haven't really given our city manager a direction to really look into see how we could be providing this type of services with various options. which I haven't seen. I've only seen at that time even that one analysis. That's it. But when we have a certain project, I'm sure the city manager and staff looks into various options as to how effective we could be, how efficient we could be in providing that service. And that's what I'm talking about. Why not give a direction to city manager to look at various options that we as council members could look into it and see if there is some sort of a way we could provide relief for the citizens. Now, again, I understand this is not going to be thousands of dollars relief, but it is some relief. And again, this is not the answer all, fix all, but it is part of something that we could provide for the citizens that they've been longing for. And if you're talking about, we've been talking about this every year for a number of years, then there's a problem why we're not able to implement something like this to that's, even if it's a minimal impact for the citizens. So that's my point.
Yeah, and I would just say that process happens every summer. You guys will spend the next 4 or 5 months going through a lot of different options of what to spend and not to spend, and at the end of the day, have the option to say we're either going to lower the tax rate or raise the homestead exemption, and that's a decision that's made every budget cycle. And there you will see there's a lot of different options to get there that the staff will present.
Cliff?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I've gone through 6 budget cycles since I have been on the council. Each and every time we have talked about numerous things related to the budget, of which homestead exemptions are just one every year. The implication was that we didn't discuss that, which is incorrect. We do. It's part of the process. And when I first ran for council, my indication was that I was going to do what I thought was best for the community as a whole. And that's what I've done, and that's the way I vote each and every time. And so I have not sit here and said, I'm not going to ever vote for a homestead exemption or a raise in the homestead edition. Incorrect. I look at the entire picture. I look to what the citizens have to pay in the way of taxes, and my decision is based on that. It's not based on the 500,000 decisions that we as a council have to make on each and every item, financial item, in the course of a budget cycle. So we don't pick them out and say, this year we're going to take care of this. We look at the entire picture. We determine what's best for the citizens in general, no specific citizens necessarily, and that's the way we vote. And John, maybe when you get to go through a cycle, you'll better understand how the process works.
Yes.
Councilmember Long, thank you so much for that response. I do appreciate your input on that. It's not that I'm saying that you don't support it, but it was pretty clear during the winter retreat that our city manager has stated that he's not going to do anything until we're given the direction to at least look into this matter seriously. So for us to at least consider all the options that are available. That was the whole point. So, if you think that I'm sitting here and because I haven't gone through a cycle, that this is not something that I could bring up because it has been discussed before, I think that's not right. That's not fair to say that as well. I mean, I understand what the information that was provided during the winter retreat. I clearly understood that our city manager said he needed a direction, at least by four council member, to look into that option and see what is available for us council members to seriously consider whether there is a viable option to provide that kind of relief for the citizens. So that's what I'm asking for.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
may I respond?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We give him direction. We give the city manager direction constantly. He is the one that has done the analysis for us so that we can make the decisions. He has spent hours working on this over the 6-year period, working on whether or not we ought to increase the exemption. And we have directed him to do that. And that's where we get the documents that we go through to determine whether or not we can do this at this particular time. So I don't know where you're getting that, because you've obviously misunderstood what the city manager was trying to say. The problem is void because we have given him direction.
Councilman Long, we could go back to the video and listen to what it was exactly said, which was, if core council member does not give me a direction, he's not going to look into it, is exactly what city manager has said that day.
That is correct. He said that unless 4 council members tell him to spend additional time on it, and in that meeting, the majority of the council members said, not now. With our challenges that are coming up, not now. And I do not believe we have a change in that direction as of right now. Is that correct? Yep. Okay. So let's move to item C, discussion regarding term limits for city council members.
Thank you, Mayor, again. Thank you again for the opportunity to talk about this topic issue. As you all know, currently Coppell does not have a term limit. Each term is a 3-year term, staggered. So we have actually 2 consecutive elections and then a year off. So it'll be election, election off, election, election off. And as you know, during the last session, I believe it was prior to this year, it was we had election cost was $12,000 per election, and generally $36,000 was allocated for the 3 election in a fiscal year. Well, we all received a sticker shocker that the new cost election cost will be $66,827.44 per election, which means that if we have 3 in a fiscal year, election is going to cost us $200,482.32 per year. So, and I apologize, I said term limit, but I also want to talk about terms as well, because there's 2 proposals that I want to talk about here, and I realize that we have an election going on. It would be unfair to ask you to go, implement this or vote on this matter, because there's going to be some new council members coming in anyway as well.
Just so that you understand,
We're not voting.
This is a
Right.
charter amendment.
Yes, ma'am.
So it's not voted on this council.
Correct.
It's voted by the people.
Correct.
Okay.
So even amending the charter, correct. So what I wanted to kind of have you and also the candidate that might be the new elected, council members to have in back of their mind a possibility of either, with a proposal of changing the terms or even amending the charter with these 2 in mind. So one of the things that I wanted people to understand is that if we do keep the current 3 years, but have a 3-year term limit, then just like other cities that have it, what that means is essentially after 3 terms, someone has to sit out for that seat, vice versa for mayor as well, unless you're running for a different seat. Sorry?
According to the charter right now, you cannot run for a different seat.
I understand. So where I'm talking about, amending the charter as well. Okay. But in any case, if we do stay with the 3-year term and 3-term limit, then nothing will change. But the second proposal that I want to talk about is changing from a 3-year term to a 4-year term, with having a 2-term limit, which essentially says 8-year is the maximum term limit for a council. Now, the reason why that is ideal is because of a number of things. Number one, if you take a 20-year span and calculated the amount of time we're going to have election for a 3-year term versus a 4-year term, that means you would have about 4 actually years that are going to be less. We're going to have 4 less elections in a 20-year span. So what that means is that we're going to actually have some savings in the long run. In the 4-year term, that'll equate to $801,929.28 saving in a 20-year span, which equates to average about $40,096.46 saving per year, if my math is correct. Now, a lot of the surrounding cities, they do have term limits. And I always believe in self-governing is a good thing. We always talk about the state level and federal level where we don't have the term limits. They become a lifetime politicians that does not serve in the interest of the community, but rather for themselves. So I think the term limit is actually essential in serving the community. And the second reason why I think that term limit is good is, in essence, what it provides is that every citizen that wants to volunteer and run and serve the community, serve the city, which is evident by the election this year, we have abundant volunteers that want to serve. It gives them the same notice as to when that term ends and gives them the same opportunity to prepare and run for city council as well. That also gives them a saving. If you're elected, that also gives them a savings. Instead of running every 3 years, if you're running and every 4 years, that'll give them, that'll save them from running additional, spending additional funds for their campaign as well. So those are the things that I want to tell you about to consider. Other city, Dallas has 2-year term with 4-term limit. Carrollton has 3-year term with 2-term limit. Plano has 4-year term with 2-term limit. Irving has a 3-year term with 3-term limit. Addison has 2-year term with 3-term limit. Southlake says, according to the secretary, because I couldn't find it online, they said they have 3-year term with 2-term limit. And I believe there's a reason why they have term limits is really at the end of the day, I mean, even when I was volunteering as a volunteer organization as a president, it's essential to bring in fresh faces, fresh ideas that is actually good for the city. So that's the reason why I'm proposing, or at least have you think about term limits, and whether it be just a term limit change or whether amending the charters to make it better for the community and better for those that are wanting to volunteer and serve the city as well.
So what you're asking for is people to consider that.
I am, and again, I understand we'll have new council members. It'd be unfair to try to do something at this moment, but maybe they also could have this in the back of their mind. And I think it's actually in the interest of the city to have term limits, regardless whether we stay with the 3-year term or go with the 4-year term.
Again, that is a process to go through a charter amendment election that would be something that this council would, or the next council, would have to discuss at a later time, maybe in retreat or something like that. But is there anything else that you want to add, or anybody have any comments?
I have a question. John. John, you talked about the cost of changing from 3 to 4 years, and that's mathematics and that's dollars and cents, and I understand that. Is there some other thing that's broken in your mind that needs to be corrected? I mean, specifically. I mean, prior events or something that you're trying to correct with this, in addition to saving some money. I think that's not important, but.
Well, I'm not sure if it's a correction, but I think I did mention that number one, it is a cost saving, and number two, I mean, we have abundant number of volunteers that want to serve in the for the city, and I think it is good to provide that kind of opportunity. But at the same time, if we have a term limit, it gives more opportunity for those that are wanting to serve. I think that's only fair, especially given the fact that, again, we complain. Well, I don't know about you, but I hear a lot of complaint about our state level and federal level, where elected officials become a lifetime politicians, and they no longer really serve in the interest of the community. And I've seen that happen, not only with the government, but also nonprofit organizations. And I always believe that you give opportunity as much as you can for others with fresh mind, fresh ideas to be able to serve the community in that capacity. And it's always better for the community when you provide that kind of opportunity. That's my belief.
That's your opinion.
That's my belief.
Yeah. Okay.
Gary?
Yeah, just a couple of comments, and again, I will be gone by the time a charter amendment vote happens, but just a few thoughts. To me, it seems contrary to the comment that we want to get more people the opportunity to participate, but we're going to extend the terms. To me, that would seem to say that's going to create fewer opportunities for elections and for people to get involved. I do think we have to be a little careful comparing ourselves to Washington, D.C., where you have folks up there for 2 or 3 or 4 decades. We just haven't had that issue. I would be okay with term limits, but we just can't make them too short. The difference in D.C., if we put term limits and half of the House got thrown out, and because of term limits, you still got half of 435 people there that know what the heck's going on. In our case, where we turn over the entire council and mayor in a 2-year time period, if you had 2 or 3 or 4 people decide to retire and the other 3 or 4 people were termed out, and I've heard of this being an issue in some of the cities that you named, they start with an entirely fresh council, and you talk about costing money. I think that has the potential to cost the city a lot of money. I'm all about citizen representation and people stepping into this job. My experience is it takes a year or 2 for a councilman to get up to speed, just because the accounting and all of that has become so complicated. And I would not think we would be efficient to totally turn over a council in a year. And so if we're going to do something like this, the terms needs to be 3 3-year terms or 4 3-year terms. When you get down to 2 3-year terms, you're going to turn over the council so fast that I don't think you're going to have a very efficient council.
And my only comment is that I too believe that people should know when it's time to move on, and term limits is a way to deal with those people who don't know it on their own. But we here in the city of Coppell have had the luxury of not having that. I mean, if you look at the people here who have, I'm the longest sitting right now, and I am moving off, and I hate to fix something that's not broken, but I also understand that, being prepared for eventualities is also, if some of the things that are going on in Austin happen, you may want to, if everything goes to November, you may want to change things, those types of things. But there is a process that I'm sure city staff can go into the detail of how to recommend those changes and how to physically go through it. And so it's a little bit more detailed than the council just voting. So those people that are, Brianna? No, go ahead.
So John, just like homestead exemptions, we've talked about term limits, and I'm happy to continue to have that conversation and think about the pros and cons and figure out what the charter would look like. I probably, like the mayor, am also a long city and council member. I will admit, though, that I think when you look at both my terms, it's been like 6 years, and then I sat out for 3, and then I ran for a different seat. And ran because I was asked by people in the community to run, and had the opportunity to continue serving. And I think that, we just need to think through what it looks like, and maybe that's something that Mike and his staff can look at when we're ready to have that conversation, as to how it's working with other cities. We don't want to necessarily reinvent the wheel, or if things aren't working somewhere else. I'm all for saving costs, but I'm also for making sure that we have some continuity and consistency, and you don't have a situation where it's constantly having a brand new council come in. I want people to have opportunities. That's why we've made changes to boards and commissions over the years, to make sure that we allow or provide those open doors so that there is revolving people coming in and fresh ideas. That's absolutely what we want. We want people to run. We want people to serve, and I think that we've provided that opportunity for people to come in and have those fresh ideas. But we also, like as Councilmember, or as Gary said, right, like sometimes it takes a couple of years to understand how the city runs or works, or how the departments function. And so when you can have some sort of overlap with new members coming in and members that have been, and council members that have been here, it helps with the transition of providing some historical perspective, and then some insight as to why some things have been done the way they've been done. And you can either decide to continue doing it that way or not, but at least provides you some groundwork to work from. So again, we've talked about it. Happy to continue talking about it. But I think maybe as a new council comes in, because you're right, I think, we could do that at retreat or wherever you want to do it, Mike. But all that to say, I'm happy to have the conversation.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question for City Manager. Mike, can you explain to us what's the process in amending the charter?
Very quickly. The charter amendment process typically involves the creation of a charter commission to do an analysis of the charter, because there may be some other things in the charter. I've been involved with 2 of them in my previous life. There may be some other things in the charter that, just don't work or aren't correct, or, whatever. Then that commission makes a recommendation to the council. Then the council considers the recommendation of whether or not all the points should be something that are put to the voters. And then an election gets called, election's held, and whatever the results are, then the charter amendment goes into effect, whatever the date is that the effective date happens. The council has the ability to individually, when I say individually as a council, to actually put something before the voters as a charter amendment without a charter commission. I've seen most cities, though, do a charter commission just because there's usually more things that they want to take up and consider.
Just to follow up, what I heard from you is, correct me if I'm wrong, we need to appoint a commission to study this and have them report back to the council for recommendation?
It's the council's choice what direction they go in. I'm not giving you a recommendation one way or the other. You have options, but the commission actually looks then at the charter and makes recommendations to charter amendments for the council consideration to put before the voters. At the end of the day, it still rests in the council's hands about what it is they put in front of the community.
So the council appoints commission.
If you choose to go in that direction, that's what happens, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Last comment.
Thank you, Mayor. So, I'm not sure exactly how putting a term limit, for example, putting a 3-term limit is going to affect the make of a council member just because we put a term limit versus them going through every election is going to be that.
Well, you just made my argument. Your term is limited by each and every election. And if the people don't want you, your term is limited.
Mayor, but just because we haven't had it here doesn't mean it's going to happen where, there's going to be a time when someone does stay longer. And I think putting a term limit is a good thing. But again, just because we have term limit, I don't understand how that's going to affect the change of council just because of that term limit.
All of the things that we're talking about here are different opinions that people have about term limits. So those are, discussions that can be had in the future. Your request was to have, people start thinking about it and start considering it. So I believe that has begun.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Item D, presentation and discussion regarding the proposed memorandum of understanding between the City of Coppell and the Coppell Arts Center Foundation. Miss Jessica, how are you doing?
Good. How are you? Good
Nice
evening.
to see you here.
It's nice to see you in person. It feels great.
It does, doesn't it?
Yes. Yes, Jessica Carpenter, Director of Parks and Recreation, and a few other folks here with us tonight. We have Alex Hargis, our Arts Center Managing Director. He'll be coming up at the end of this presentation to chat with you a bit and answer any questions you have. We also have Penelope Furry. She's our Arts Center Foundation President, as well as Greg Goyne, our Vice President. So they're all here with us this evening. So tonight I'm here to provide you just an informational update regarding the proposed memo of understanding between the City of Coppell and the Coppell Arts, Cultural, and Heritage Foundation, also known as the Coppell Arts Center Foundation. So the goal of the MOU was to create a document that establishes really the spirit of the working relationship between the two entities as we move forward. And I can personally say, and I think everybody here tonight would agree, that this process has really solidified this working relationship in a really positive way. So we also have a few fun photographs kind of stuck in this presentation here and there tonight. So this is a photo of a concert in our main hall of the Selkie Girls, just from several weeks back. I'd like to take a few moments to update you on the history and kind of tell you how we got to where we are today. So during the original presentation of the Art Center business plan in early 2019, it was identified that a 501c3 entity would be formed to support the Arts Center. This began in spring of 2019 with the Development Task Force, a small group of citizens, and then really formed into a decision to create the foundation at the end of 2019. And happy to report that just in March of this year, the foundation has officially received their 501c3 designation from the IRS. Just a brief overview of sort of the responsibilities of the two entities. So on your left, you have the Art Center Foundation, which again is a citizen board, fully independent of the city, so not a city-appointed board or commission. They act as brand ambassadors in an advisory capacity to staff. They're going to be focusing on fundraising for all non-capital projects, as well as community engagement programming. And then on the other side, you've got the City of Coppell responsibilities, which is in the Parks and Recreation Department. We're still responsible for the daily operations of the center in terms of presenting programming, acting as liaisons for those 5 resident companies, as well as all strategic planning efforts for the Arts Center. So this slide really details what the Art Center Foundation is all about. At the top there, you'll see that the singular goal of the foundation is to ensure the success of the Coppell Arts Center. And then down below, you'll see the 4 core pillars, which are really the underpinnings of that mission. On your left is Cultivate, and this speaks to the fundraising element of the Art Center Foundation. Elevate is really their advisory capacity and the way that they're going to serve and advise staff. Activate, which is really the volunteerism arm, and we'll speak a little bit more about that later, but these folks have already given so much time and value to us. As well as Advocate, and this is that brand ambassadorship that I spoke about earlier. Really getting out into the community, making sure people know about the Art Center and see it in a positive light. And then these are really interesting here at the bottom, if you can read those. Just talking about the value that the foundation really is bringing and the experience that they're bringing over 140 plus years of sales and marketing experience, 160 plus years of nonprofit and civic experience, and 200 plus years of business leadership experience. So that's a lot of value that they're bringing to the partnership. This is a photo of the Digiland event that ran for several weeks in the Black Box. So this was a fully immersive digital experience with a bunch of screens, and it was a really, really big hit, and children loved it. So it was great. I hope you guys got out there to see that. So this is a quick snapshot of our current members of the foundation. Some of these folks have been serving in their roles for almost 2 years at this point. They, again, have provided such immense value, and they've partnered with city staff on a topping out ceremony, a brand promise workshop, a press preview day, as well as donor cultivation all along the way. These are some photos of some events that we put on and how the foundation has partnered with us. So there's some press preview day pictures. You see Ed Gee on there, who's also a member of the foundation, speaking at the topping out ceremony. So as you can tell, all of these pictures were pre-COVID pictures. These are some beautiful pictures of the Holy Celebration that took place at the Art Center at the end of March. So this was, the Festival of Colors and an event that was to welcome spring. So a beautiful event, very, very, very widely attended, and staff received a lot of praise for this event. And then just briefly touching on some elements of the Memorandum of Understanding. So again, the MOU is divided into sections. It's going to detail the foundation's responsibilities, the city of Coppell's responsibilities, as well as the joint responsibilities. The city and the foundation are two separate entities. The foundation's sole mission is to support the Coppell Arts Center. Any non-capital fundraising will be the focus of the foundation. So this is things like educational programming, entertainment programming, and then any capital-related fundraising is going to, again, lie with the city. So this is anything physical. This is the seating, building-related materials and fixtures, performance halls, etc. There will be some resource sharing along the way among both entities, such as joint marketing efforts, advisory efforts, and use of the facility. And then details regarding facility use will actually be formalized in a separate operational agreement. So again, the purpose of tonight's presentation was to update council just briefly on the formation of the foundation, provide an overview of the responsibilities of both entities as we go forward, and offer a high-level outline of the MOU. So staff does plan to bring back the MOU for formal approval at next council meeting on April 27th. At this time, I'd be happy to turn over to Alex Hargis to answer any questions you may have. He's the right guy to talk to.
Thank you very much, and hello, Alex.
Well, hi there. Good evening, Mayor and Council.
You have anything you'd like to add to what's already said?
The only thing I would really add to it is it really cannot be overstated the amount of commitment and service that our citizens have done on this board. I mean, it is literally hundreds and hundreds of hours they have dedicated over the past 2 years towards this project, and have been with us through the highs and the lows as we've gone through this year, and the amount of effort that they have put in to do it the right way, to set up the foundation in a way that is sustainable and has great legal underpinnings. We cannot commend them enough for their efforts.
Thank you. Council questions? Thoughts? Council or Wes?
Thank you. Alex, just kind of at a very, very high level, after we hope we're entering into a post-pandemic era, at least we hope we are, what's the plans to get back to a new normal, and, what are the future plans of where we're going?
Yes, so at a very high level, right? At a very high level, we want people to be able to connect together in person. I mean, we've all been starving for that for such a long time. And whether that is for entertainment, through the arts because you're attending the ballet, or it's for a social gathering, it's a wedding, it's your daughter getting married and you want to be there and share in that moment, or it's exposing the community to new cultural backgrounds and opportunities, like the Holy Festival. It was phenomenal seeing people come up and try chai tea for the first time. And they were like, this is amazing. I was like, I know, it's flavorful. That at a high level is what we wanted, to get people back together in a very safe environment and have those connections. And the foundation will be a key to that in helping us provide more programming opportunities, because there's more brain power they bring to it, and helping us doing it efficiently and more cost effectively as well.
John?
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a comment. I appreciate Ms. Penelope and Mr. Gregg, I guess it was. I was able to review, or you gave me a presentation of what you went through, and I know you guys spent so much time, and there was so much that you have provided to me. I don't even remember all the things, but I know that with all the experience that all of you have brought to the table, I know the foundation is in good hands. So I applaud you for all the work that's been done, and applaud you all as well.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you. Anybody else? Please take that message back to the foundation as a whole. You guys have been engaged. Wonderful reports about all the things that you guys are doing, and do appreciate the time, the effort, and really focusing on doing it the right way and making sure that the system and the structure is set up for the future. You could have just tried to, run forward and do things and, look at the short-term prize, but you guys really spent the time to make sure that the long-term was taken care of, and that is greatly appreciated by all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Item E, discussion regarding the ordinance amendment to increase the maximum operating speed for passenger trains for DART Silver Line service.
Hello, Mayor, Council.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you. I am pleased to be here this evening. This is also an informational briefing for the Council to provide some information on an proposed ordinance amendment for the maximum allowable speeds for trains within the corporate limits for the City of Coppell. So we are not requesting any action this evening, but we will be providing information on Section 7-2-18, which, if you are not familiar, is the section of our Code of Ordinances that speaks to the maximum allowable speeds through the City of Coppell. So this is our ordinance language as it exists today, and essentially it just says you cannot go faster than 20 miles an hour if you are a train through any of the at-grade crossings within the corporate limits for the City of Coppell. This was an ordinance that we've been in conversations with DART staff on for many months now. Not a function of we are in disagreement, but just a function of in what format will this ordinance change be brought to the Council for consideration. And the next slide this illustrates why we are here before you this evening. So this is a chart that's been provided to us by DART on the proposed maximum operating speeds for the at-grade crossings within Coppell. Now, you will also notice that East Beltline Road is included on here. While that's not technically within the corporate limits of Coppell, it's kind of within the corridor of Coppell. So there are 8 crossings that are within the corporate limits of City of Coppell, in addition to East Beltline Road. All of those crossings are proposed to have a operational speed, greater than 20 miles an hour. And so from the DART perspective, this is a really critical ordinance amendment in terms of what the service will look like. They have gone through a lot of engineering to get to this place. And so what DART is requesting is that Council consider amending the ordinance to reflect an operating speed not to exceed 60 miles an hour. And we will be working with the DART staff to draft some language and bring back an ordinance for council's consideration. As we walk through that discussion, I wanted to share with the council what our priorities will be as we have those conversations. So the first is that this exemption for the maximum allowable speed will be limited to the DART Silver Line only, so for passenger trains only. So this would not impact and create a situation where we have freight riding through the corporate limits of Coppell at speeds greater than 20 miles per hour. And we would be, there is some flexibility on what that maximum allowable speed could be. So 60 really is the highest at which that's going to occur. There is some flexibility there. So if it turns out that the maximum allowable speed that DART needs is 55, then that's kind of where we'll have those conversations to see what that really needs to be. But this is really the top end of the request that DART has provided to us, knowing that if we go back to this chart, obviously Royal Lane at the very far west side of Coppell, very little residential, very little pedestrian interaction. Coming straight from the airport, that's going to be our highest speed crossing. And so that's where 60 has come from as our starting point. So our next steps would be, as I mentioned, to continue working with the DART staff to craft some language that everybody is satisfied with, that meets our priorities, that meets what DART needs in terms of their service plan for the revenue service, and bring that ordinance back to City Council for adoption and consideration. At this point, I'll be happy to entertain any questions that Council may have. I do have a passel of support with us this evening on the call. So we have several team members from DART, and then I have several team members from Archer Western on if there are design questions.
Cliff.
Yes, Mayor, I have a question for Tracy. Tracy, so what you're telling us is that what you have published here for our review as far as these speeds is a suggestion. This is not what they're recommending. This is a suggestion at this point.
These are the maximum. So if we go back to this slide, so these are the maximum operating speeds
for each
one of those crossings.
Okay.
There, from an operational standpoint, DART may determine that, for example, at South Coppell Road, that represents kind of the dividing line between the west side and then where you start getting into the residential core. Clearly, there's lower maximum speeds at that point as you're heading east. So it is possible that all of these speeds will be lower than what is here. These represent the maximum operational speed at which DART feels, from an operations standpoint, is feasible.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, sir. And if anybody on the DART call, I'm looking up into the ceiling, if anybody on the DART call has anything to add to that response, I'll be happy to pause here for just a moment.
Ms. Tracy Leach and City Council, this is David Ehrlicher from Dallas Area Rapid Transit, and I have no other comments at this time to supplement Tracy Leach's presentation.
Thank you, David, for being here. Gary.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Ehrlicher, I'm just trying to understand the philosophy here. It looks like we're slowing down as the train comes into town and then speeding back up. But I mean, I'm looking at Mockingbird, a street that doesn't have a tremendous amount of traffic, and South MacArthur, a street that has a tremendous amount of traffic, and we're going 50 miles an hour through MacArthur and slower through Mockingbird. So maybe it's a function of my A&M education or something, but I'm just trying to understand, is it the curve that's causing that? Help me understand the philosophy here.
Sure thing. Yes, sir. And a couple of guiding principles. Every crossing is safe regardless of speed, and you are correct. Speed is governed more by topography and track geometry. It's not governed by adjacent uses or traffic volumes on the street at the street crossings. So the intent of sharing this table with you is giving you what track geometry will allow as we work through the final operating model, keeping in mind that we are going to try to optimize the speed to keep the rapid in rapid transit.
Thank you, David.
And
That helps a
strike
lot.
the right balance with system safety.
Wes?
Thank you. Tracy, two items. I don't want to get engineering wise, but I remember that the tracks were only certified to 59 miles an hour during a previous presentation that was probably 2 years ago. We've got a 60 mile an hour up here. Has the rating of the track been increased since we heard about that?
I'll be happy to defer that question to our Archer Western team and our DART team.
Yes, sir. I will invite Darwin Deason, who's on the call from our program management team, just to speak to the rating of the track. But keep in mind, we are removing the existing single track that is in the alignment today and putting in new double track. You are correct. Independent of geometry, the type of rail and track constructions that's provided has its own inherent maximum operating speed. Darwin, can you comment on that for us?
Yeah, Dave, can y'all hear me?
Yes, sir.
So, yeah, I mean, Class 4 track is actually rated to a maximum of 79 mile an hour, but that the operation of a track is truly limited by the geometry of the track and the configuration of the alignment. So, but a Class 4 track federally is regulated to a maximum of 79 mile an hour track.
So my memory is off by 20 miles an hour.
As far as the class of track.
Okay,
Yes,
because that was what I was remembering. I remember the class had a maximum, and I thought it was 59, so apologize for that. But that leads into the second question, which is, are these consistent with the numbers that were used for the sound models that we spent so much time on?
There are, if you look back to the final environmental impact statement and the noise modeling that was conducted for each one of these locations, those speeds are going to reflect differently from here, and so they are different. I will again defer to DART team to help us understand the difference between those, but yes, they are different.
Yep. Thank you, Tracy Leach. We will abide by the sound mitigation requirements that are in the FEIS. If any of these we will retest for any changes that are made during the final design to make the determination if additional mitigation is required.
And that mitigation would involve reduction in speed or additional treatment to the roadbeds or peripheral equipment.
You're right. There could be a range of mitigation strategies that could be applied.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions? I know I've seen trains like going in Carrollton and in Richardson zipping by, and I'm always amazed that all of the arms come down and everything is ding, ding, dinging, and then they're gone and everything opens up again. So I think they're fast. But so I know that the speeds kind of make people a little nervous, but I think DART's track record, it came out that way, and I went, ooh, that's kind of a pun. But their track record is great as far as safety, and if this makes everything work, then, so what you're talking about is making an exception to that.
Yes, for passenger
For that, yeah.
traffic only for Dart Silver Line.
Because I'm sitting here wondering when that freight train goes by, I'm like, oh, will it just go faster? But no, it doesn't. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I'm sorry. Nope. Okay, thank you. Discussion, the last item, discussion regarding mask mandate in city facilities and COVID-19 safety protocols in relation to citizen appearance comments. Relation to citizens appearance comments?
I just think in the past we've gotten comments related to the mask.
Oh, okay, yes.
So I think that's what that's in reference to.
Okay.
That's actually on how we would like to receive citizen comments in a COVID environment.
Oh, okay.
So we've got the call-in, we've got the email, we've got the in-person. How would we like to, in a post-COVID, and what point would we like to change? Do we want to change? How would we like to receive those?
Yeah, you had this discussion 2 weeks ago where we would take the comments, people could call in,
yes,
written comments. That's so we were asked for every council meeting to have this on the agenda.
So it's two separate items.
They're related.
Related to COVID protocols and practices.
Because since now we are meeting in person.
Yeah.
And we have the hybrid that's still going on. So that's how the two are related.
The item that's going through the legislature right now,
That you spoke on?
on that allows us to continue with the virtual, the hybrid going forward. So the question, I know last time we had talked, is my suggestion, because we still had certain citizens sending us written information, which typically we have that information just sent out to council. But if they specifically want their comments read at a council meeting, do you want to continue that? But if it's not specifically requested, somebody will just send it out normally like we do, or like staff does. Is that good? Huh? Go ahead.
The only thing is, I think there's been a lot of confusion as to what was actually needed to be done to have it read during the citizens' appearance time. And that needs to be, I think, better clarified for the citizens, because I think some of them sent an email automatically thinking that's going to be read into it, but the procedure-wise, they didn't. I guess there is a procedure-wise that they didn't follow and they didn't know about. So apparently a lot of people don't know about it, so I think we do need to somehow get that information out there.
Well, it was new. It was new for COVID, so it doesn't surprise me. Right now, Miss Ashley, how is it stated on the website?
So every meeting has a little blurb at the bottom that just states if you would like to have a comment read into the record at City Council, please email citysec@coppelltx.gov, or come into Town Center and sign up at the table outside Chambers.
Okay, so how do you distinguish between somebody sending an email and somebody sending an email that wants to be read?
So I think what's being referred to is when somebody sends an email to citycouncil@coppelltx.gov, that is the difference between the city sec email.
Okay. Okay.
So when somebody sends an email to citycouncil@coppelltx.gov, all of you receive that email.
Okay.
By the rule of the email. And when somebody sends an email to CitySec, that to me triggers the comment during citizens' appearance.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions about that part of it? Okay. Yeah, we haven't done that yet.
Just to clarify, but even if it does actually goes to the council, if it does specify saying they want to be read into, it will be considered that, correct?
That is true. We will abide by that. Yes.
Okay. Bijou.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm looking at the email from Tracy in regards to that vaccination reports. Mike, can you please explain? We have this Excel spreadsheet. I don't know if it's shared with the public yet. It shows about number of people fully vaccinated, about 80,000 people. Is it any way we can find out how many people in Coppell got vaccinated?
Yeah. We have consistently asked that question of the Dallas County Health Department, and the answer to that is no. Excuse me, I got choked up. The answer to that is no. Now, they used to keep that information when everything got first started, but as time went on, they dropped the consistent providing that breakdown. So we do not have a way of identifying or isolating Coppell.
But there is something,
Yeah.
there is
May I?
some map somewhere that says.
Correct. And I was just about to point to that, saying that there is a map provided by KXAN where if you put the zip code, it actually tells you what percentage is actually fully vaccinated. And according to this, the population of Coppell, 42,888, fully vaccinated, not fully, is 30.80% at this as of yesterday.
And how many of our.
Hold on. We'll take a look at that. I need to know what the source of it is, though.
Sure.
I mean, appreciating that. And if that's the information that you would like in addition to what actually comes from the health department, and that'd be fine. We'll be able to provide it.
Why don't you forward that link to him? And then look at that as based of who is eligible to be vaccinated.
Yeah.
It's got to be a pretty good percentage of the total that are eligible to be vaccinated. It's what, 16?
Right now it's 16 and up.
Yeah.
Above the population, so I would imagine.
Because that's based on the whole population, right? Yeah. Okay. So information, we get lots of information. How is everybody feeling about the mask mandate in city facilities? Gary?
Yeah, I would say one of the things that is causing my thoughts to change somewhat, it was the CDC information this past week. One of the things that swayed me toward continuing to require masks was some of the information that Councilmember Hill had shared that indicated that individuals that were fully vaccinated could still spread the virus. And then from what I understood from reading last week was the CDC came out and said that is not the case. And so that changes my thought process somewhat toward allowing folks that are fully vaccinated to not wear a mask, because I'm not sure what the reasoning is. I would like to see our numbers be slightly higher, and I know people on social media said, what's the threshold? And I don't know the threshold. But I just felt compelled to say that the fact that an individual can come in and be fully vaccinated and the CDC said they can't spread the virus makes me want to allow them to do that.
So are you thinking that you want to eventually think about conditional?
I don't know how you do that, frankly. I don't know how you could have everybody that comes in have to show their vaccination card, and that doesn't work. Eventually, we've got to get to the point where we say people need to act like adults, and if you're vaccinated, don't wear a mask, and if you haven't been and feel like you need a mask, wear a mask. So I guess that's where I'm leaning towards.
Thank you. Brianna.
Thank you. Yeah, we don't want to ask people if they've been vaccinated or not, and that I guess for me it's a matter of that. I think there's still so much unknown, and there's still so much like I feel like every day the CDC is saying something, because I know that even in the corporate world things are shifting. It's you can be on the plane, not be on the plane. You have to quarantine. You don't. I would like to see us continue to keep the mask mandate at this time. I think that there are still people who have not had the opportunity to be vaccinated for whatever different reasons. I think there's still just a lot of unknowns. There's been things that came out about the Johnson & Johnson one. There's, again, I think that I would like to err on the side of continuing to keep our citizens safe. And if that means wearing a mask, you got to do it when you walk into a restaurant. You got to do it when you walk into shop at Tom Thumb or Kroger's or other stores. So we're not the exception. And so I don't know where everybody else sits, but I would like us to continue doing it. And I think we just need a little bit more information. And one of the things we talked about was continuing to monitor this, have numbers. I know that the message we got today is people are pushing back or not happy or whatever it may be. We're never going to make everybody happy. And I personally am always going to err on the side of caution and safety. So.
Mr. Cliff.
Thank you, Mayor. Get this mask off. My position has not changed. It's not going to make any difference one way or the other, and I think that we don't need to be babysitters for our citizens. I think they have their own. I mean, they've gotten this far. They know what they need to do. If they're uncomfortable, they can wear their mask all they want to, but I don't think that we need to do it in the city facilities. I certainly don't think we need to do it over at the Arts Center, where I've been several times, because the thermometer is back, so everyone that comes in the door gets the temperature read. And it just, it's just, and there's social distancing, and if they want to continue that, I have no problem with that. But I think that the individuals ought to make their own decision.
John.
Thank you, Mayor. I had a question for our city manager. I know part of the reason of mandating the mask was not only the citizens but also our staff. Do we have a data as to how, our staff, what percentage has been vaccinated or?
We're much in the same boat as the public information as far as who's received vaccinations or not. We do have data on the number of employees that have been vaccinated. We get a report through our health insurance because we're self-funded. We also have a report of the number of employees who have, since the start, have come down with COVID-19. The numbers, much like everything else, more recently, and I'll say recently in terms of months, as far as the numbers, they were increasing just like they were in the community. It's just the natural progression of the sickness. And the vaccinations, off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you, but it's less than half of our employees have received vaccinations, and we do not require vaccinations.
Okay. And if I may continue, for me, looking at this is KXAM, which is a affiliate of NBC in Dallas and Austin, and if their data is pretty correct, then if we have 30% of our citizens that are actually vaccinated, I think that there's always an argument for every other argument, but the way I saw was that half of our citizens didn't want the mandate, half the citizens really wanted the mandate. And we're getting closer to almost to the midpoint of having people, fully vaccinated. So, I would err on the caution for maybe just a little bit longer, and not, I don't know, maybe within a week or two we might get to 45%, and I would feel more comfortable at that point, because if half the people didn't want this, it is highly likely that half people are never going to get vaccinated, and if we're at that point, then I would be fully supporting lifting the mandate.
Thank you. A week or two ago, I was fully prepared to not require masks until I saw the most recent data. And so from a data standpoint, the uptick in confirmed positive cases in Dallas County substantially went up. So I agree with Councilmember John that we're getting close. The immunization rates are looking very good, but I think we need to go a little bit longer. Not a lot longer, but a little longer till we see a consistent downward trend, which we haven't seen yet.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I would wait 2 more weeks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we will come back together again on the 27th, so we can look at the numbers again then. Okay. That is the end of our work session. We do have one executive session item that will probably take a little longer than 20 minutes. So we will adjourn from work session, and we will come back for regular session at 7:30. Thank you. We still have 2 minutes if you want to keep talking. Okay, it is 7:30, and let's move into the regular agenda. We have a quorum. Our invocation tonight will be given by Councilmember Bijou Matthew, and then we will do the Pledge of Allegiance. So please remain standing for the pledge.
Let's pray. O Lord, we bow our heads before you in humility. Thank you for giving us one more day to live in this wonderful world. Dear Lord, as we gather together, we praise you for this day and your purpose for it. O God, bless our agenda to be fruitful and for the common good. Grant that our mayor, council members, and staff have the ears to listen to the people that we serve and wisdom to act for justice. We pray for our citizens who are affected by COVID-19, who lost their jobs, lost health insurance during this pandemic. We pray for our doctors, nurses, mid-level providers, and all medical professionals, firefighters, police, and first responders. Give them the strength to execute their craft with excellence. O God, guide us with your wisdom and knowledge during our discussion and debate, and help us to formulate the right policy for all our residents. Doesn't matter which age group they belong to, area of the city they live in, and economic status they hold. Fair and equitable to all residents. We ask your blessings on our city of Coppell. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands. Okay, the next item on our agenda is citizens' appearance. Persons wishing to speak on any matter other than an item that is scheduled for a public hearing on the agenda must sign in and register. Presentations by individuals shall be limited to 2 minutes each. I will call them in order in the way that they have signed in. So first person on the list is Devin Bernstein. And Mr. Bernstein, I know you know this, but please state your name and address for the record. And welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Davin Bernstein, 228 Hollywood Drive. So I wanted to speak this evening on the homestead exemption. I did hear the conversation that was going on. Thank goodness for Zoom. I appreciate the city making that available for more citizens to be able to participate real time in the discussions, the working sessions. I wanted to bring up a couple of points that I did not hear said this evening. The first one is that the data that was provided by the city, it had some information, but it really was missing a lot of important information, and it was not a part of the discussion this evening. So we have a whole list of all the cities in Dallas County and the homestead exemption that they have. But what we didn't talk about is what is the population or what is the location of the city, right? So a lot of things in real estate are typically done in bands, and you pick a city and then you pick the comparable cities that are near it, right? Similar in population, similar in demographics, similar in business, residential mix. So a lot of that was missing. So the most comparable cities, right, to Coppell would have a similar population. So I would ask that the city take a look at those values, those additional numbers behind the numbers. Second of all, last week during the budget discussion, the comptroller mentioned that for each point that the homestead exemption is increased, it's about $225,000 that would be quote unquote lost revenue. But it's not really lost revenue because the homestead exemption is part of the mix before, and then the tax rate is established to achieve the revenue for the budget afterwards. So once you've established that mix, to have a better homestead exemption that is more typical for cities around us, right, then the tax rate would be adjusted. So that $225,000, if you were to increase it 1 percentage point, would be offset, even if we wanted to do it this year, by the $6 million increase in sales tax revenues over what was budgeted for this year, and then in last year. Could I have additional 2 minutes? Thank you, Mayor. So in the This year, so far, we have an additional $1 million and expected to have $10 million from the sales tax revenue over what was projected. So that's actually a large pot of money, some of which will be consumed by increasing services, but could certainly, part of it could go into the discussion of of what the percentage homestead could be. Lots of reasons to consider it, and people talked about things, but basically the attitude was, well, it's too small, so we won't do anything. That doesn't sound right to me. If it's the right thing to do, then we should do it, even if it is a little bit, and then we explain to people that we took the right amount and took the right directional call that people have asked for. I'd also like to mention that it's the 3 most recent members who were elected to City Council who have asked the City Council and the City Manager to take a look at this issue, and so I don't want the City Council to have this attitude of being a resistant old guard. We should take a look at the newer people who are here, and there's potentially one more that will come through because several people have elections coming up. I really like the council to consider that as well when they ask the city manager what to do. And that's really what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next person is Thomas Burrows. Welcome, and please state your name and address for the record.
Thomas Burrows, 138 Windpage Drive. There's been about 120 years of film or video production, give or take. Since in that time period, there's been 114 years of some movies made about the Texas Rangers. John Wayne has been a Ranger at least twice. We all remember Walker, Texas Ranger, although the poor guy was lastly in those QT commercials shooting out little things. There was a young boy named Cody Allen who grew up in Coppell, graduated high school in 2003. He became a Texas State Trooper. While under gunfire, Trooper Allen rescued a wounded sheriff who had been shot down in a botched store robbery. Then Trooper Allen took out the bad guy who was holding a hostage with a gun to her head. Trooper Allen won the 2014 William P. Clements Award for Texas State Department of Public Safety Outstanding State Trooper Award. Then Trooper Allen worked undercover penetrating the cartels per the human trafficking of underage females into prostitution, which we would all think that's a wonderful thing. 2.5 years ago, Trooper Allen was asked to join the Texas Rangers. One is asked to join the Rangers. You do not apply to them. They come to you. I turned this information over to Councilmember Long over there, thinking that, we would want to award this young man who's from our town. He said he turned it over to the city manager. We've never heard anything else about that. Ranger Allen happens to be the grandson of my father-in-law's wife. I've never met the kid, to be honest with you. For the last 6 months, I've been besieging the city with emails about the south end of the city and the trash and the dumps and the crud there. The Sheraton tells me that they can't get the trash picked up, so they have to pile it outside their dumpster enclosure because they will not pick it up, which is because of COVID. And I find that really interesting. Finally, I sent so many emails and stuff that Councilman John came to me and said, what in the world are you doing sending all these pictures and stuff, to me? I wonder if there's a correlation, the fact that I was the one that turned this information in, to the fact that we are ignoring Ranger Allen, who has saved 2 lives, definitely, plus others from prostitution. Just saying. Thank you, Council.
Thank you very much. There is no one else who's signed up? No one else who has signed up? So we will move to item 7, which is presentations, and we are very lucky today to have Keita Hobbs here from Encore. Encore is here, or Keita is here to give us information regarding the whole winter storm, the electric supply, all of those things. So we very much appreciate you being here and looking forward to the information you're going to share.
Well, thank you, Mayor Hunt, and thank you, Council. Thank you, City Manager Mike Land and city staff, as well as Coppell residents. I appreciate the opportunity to allow Encore to come here and really express what we experienced as well as what we learned from the recent load shedding event as well as winter storm. My name again is Akita Hobbs. I am the new area manager for Encore. Unfortunately, many of us have not met in person, but I think after February, maybe you became familiar with my name. So I definitely want to, again, thank you, but personally thank Mike Land as well as Kent Collins and Council for your ongoing communication during that time. I know Councilwoman Hinojosa Smith and I, we spoke over the phone, we text, and it really speaks to the leadership of Coppell, of ensuring that you received the information from Encore as we received it and got it out to your residents. So I definitely appreciate that. When we begin to really think about this storm and the event, we understand the impact that it had on a lot of Texans. We understand the impact it had on Coppell residents. Every time I think about this, I am still saddened because I know that this storm impacted so many throughout the state of Texas, but as well as impacted our most vulnerable, and that resulted in loss of life. And going forward, we keep that at the forefront of our minds when we begin to really review what we just basically could have done better, and we know that, as well as what we did do right during this time. And I will speak and say, and I've heard many of my leadership say, that Encore did exactly what we were supposed to do. We wanted to protect the grid. We came seriously close to losing and having an overall blackout, and we wanted to do our part as ERCOT and directed us to. We'll talk about a few things as we go through this event. We'll talk about some things that we do know, what we do know about this storm. So what we know, we had record low temps in the entire state that drove peak demand. On Sunday, February 14th, we had a new ERCOT winter peak, and that was over 69,000 megawatts. They expected the next morning to be even higher. As the temp fell overnight, Sunday night, we began to lose power generation. This resulted in a shortfall of power generation, as you can expect, and this led to the load shedding event. On Monday, February 15th at 1:20 a.m., ERCOT called for the first load shedding event. We'll go to the next slide. So I will try not to bore you all, but I have a lot of information that I definitely want to share. On this slide here, you'll see that there are going to be some topics that we're going to discuss throughout this entire presentation. These are some questions that we've received from some of our city leaders like yourselves. I'm sure maybe some of you have heard this over Easter dinner or just with family. And so I definitely want to ensure that I can answer questions that many residents may have about what happened. So we'll start at the very beginning. When we look at communication process and challenges, given the quick load shed requirements and other storm-related outages, there was simply no time to notify anyone in advance of the load shedding event. You will recall that you received some proactive communications from people like myself, an area manager. And for example, there was one that said, ERCOT extreme cold weather alert, or as well as the ERCOT call for conservation of energy. And I don't know if you've all had a chance to look at your email today, but I sent one before this one because ERCOT is called a conservation for energy. Now, we did, like I said, utilize proactive communication, and I did provide as much information as we had it to you all. We utilized social media. You saw Twitter. We utilized, news outlets as well. But again, we had some challenges. I recognize how frustrating it was. I had family calling me as well because when you call into Encore, you couldn't get anybody. That was the one frustrating part. Or when you look at our outage map, you don't see your outage reported. And I know many of you were bombarded with questions about that because of what they were seeing. And I'm here to say, and what we've realized is that our systems honestly could not keep up. And that's just the honest truth. When we look at our call center, we received over 3.3 million phone calls during that event. To put that in comparison with 2020, the entire year of 2020, we received 2.3 million calls. So just that short amount of time, you see the significant impact it had on our system. When we begin to look at our outage map, we had 15 million online views. And again, our outage map could not keep up. It could not keep up with reflecting the load shedding events as well as additional outages that were caused by the winter storm. So unfortunately from that, we experienced that situation, but we are working on developing analytics and programs that process and help us identify the outages behind the load shed. So we recognize we have some work to do. One thing that I did see, just hearing some of my leadership and when they're speaking to community partners, my VP, Debbie Dennis, she said, you know, we try to get out there and we try to communicate with customers and get on the news and say, go find a warming station. And she said this, we didn't realize that most people didn't have their TVs on. So these were things that we were impacted with just no energy anywhere. When we look at the next thing, when we talk about rotating outages versus controlled outages, when initially this was communicated, we all expected about 15 to 45 minutes for the rolling outages. And honestly, that happened the first hour. But as ERCOT continued to require us to shed significant load, the number of feeders that were required to de-energize grew. And this resulted in controlled outages. And that is when more feeders went off for longer periods of time. We did run into a situation, multiple situations, where you have a large feeder that's out and you want to give them some relief, so you roll them back on. Well, we noticed they came on with significantly higher load usage, of course, due to heating. So that, bringing those back on, impacted the feeders that were already out. And we had to leave them out for an extended amount of time to be able to maintain the load that we put on. And during all of this, ERCOT is still calling for us to shed more load. I do want to address another question that has really been going around as far as, was this process equitable? I'm here to answer, yes, it was. Out of the 1.3 million customers we had, they were out throughout our entire service area. There were specific facilities that were excluded from the load shedding. That includes DFW. We have Love Field. And there were some facilities that utilized transportation of natural gas and any gas to our generation. And those were the ones that we were aware of. So they were excluded. We also excluded feeders that served hospitals, 911 centers. And so those were another that were excluded. I know when the question came up if this was equitable, when Highland Park was mentioned, Mike and I had a very detailed conversation about that, because I think that a lot of residents were seeing on our outage map, again, communication issues and challenges that we ran into, that they didn't think that other cities had outages. I work directly with the area manager for Highland Park and previously was there before myself, and I know with my own eyes they experienced outages for multiple days. Council members were out for multiple days. And so unfortunately, those communication challenges created more questions for us. We do have a manual load shed plan that is managed by a cross-functional team of stakeholders that's actually reviewed twice a year. And from my understanding, it's really spring and fall of winter when they review this. This is actually a part of the System Emergency Operation Procedure Manual Update. Again, this is reviewed twice a year. When we look at the next topic, critical load and critical care customers, you have chronic condition, critical care, or critical load customers. Those can be included in the load shed events. Please understand that 2/3 of Encore's feeders, they all serve some form of critical load. And when we start looking at the critical load, that's really pertaining to our process for restoration. When we have a thunderstorm, when we're getting and doing our normal operations of turning the lights back on, those critical loads are priority for us. Again, this is a different situation when we start to look at what is called load shedding from ERCOT. I want to give a definition just so everyone can understand what critical load is defined as. Critical load is electric service crucial for protection or maintenance of public safety. This is including but not limited to hospitals, police stations, fire stations, and critical water and waste facilities. This is determined by the Public Utility Commission of Texas. Critical care customers. This is based on the need of electric powered devices to address significant medical conditions. Again, this is determined by the Public Utility Commission of Texas. This information for any residents can be found on Encore.com. I know Kent Collins and I have been working together looking at the list, the critical load list for Coppell, and so we've been working already on that, ensuring that we're on the same page. The next question, I'm sure that many of you have heard. I heard this weekend with family. Why were some customers and locations not impacted? And if we refer back to some of those loads that we did not include that were on those networks that were excluded maybe for technical reasons, those were feeders that someone could be on and not impacted. Another group that we really have to look at is a group that were on the under frequency relays. I don't know if anyone has heard this term, but this is pretty much a safety net that Encore holds back about 25% of our load as a final safeguard. This is against a total blackout if frequency drops to an extremely low levels, and we came dangerously close to some very low levels. Under frequency relays are primarily residential because they are the most predictable. And again, under frequency relays are installed as an automatic safety net to save the system just in case humans can't act fast enough. To give you an idea, this is about 40% of Encore's feeders. Again, 25% of our overall load. These feeders are found throughout the system and are reviewed annually. We'll talk about our next steps at the end of the presentation, but what I want to do is just really go through what we experienced and what we saw. So when we look at the slide, we begin to see the ERCOT market structure. As you'll see on the left, the generators produce power and put power on the grid for ERCOT to manage. Transmission and distribution, regulated companies like Encore, and we transmit the power from generators to customers. And the REPs, retail electricity providers, and they are marketing and selling power to customers. Again, Encore is a regulated TDU in ERCOT. Again, that's transmission and distribution. We deliver electricity over 10 million Texans. We operate more than 139,000 miles of T&D lines. We employ more than 44,000 Texans in our service area. And our service areas span Permian Basin to Piney Woods and Red River to Round Rock. So on this next slide, it kind of gives you a snapshot of the overall event. Our Encore CEO, Alan Nye, he stated when he testified in front of Senate as well as the House, and basically said Encore did what we usually do when preparing for a storm. And that's exactly what we did. You'll see in the top left-hand corner, staffing was increased at Encore to ensure people were ready to respond. We actually had over 26,000 mutual assistance crews that came from Atlanta and Florida. And we opened and staffed system emergency centers. Another thing is that we worked with many cities for emergency response areas as well as any potential staging areas. I know even over dinner I was on a few conference calls Thursday and Friday night just preparing for what may come. When we look at the overall graph, we're able to see on February 15th at 1:20 a.m., ERCOT instructed Encore to shed 1,000 megawatts. Between 1:45 and 2 a.m., ERCOT instructed Encore to shed its share of 9,500 megawatts. And then ERCOT continued to instruct Encore and other TDU companies to shed and restore load on the amount of generation available. In the blue, you'll see at the height of the event on Monday, ERCOT shed a total load of 20,000 megawatts. Encore's share of that was 7,200 megawatts. After Monday afternoon, ERCOT allowed for us to restore a little bit of load because of some generation that came back online. But all generation was not back online until late Wednesday, February 17th. When we look at the Encore emergency response, so the primary goal of Encore's load shed plan is to quickly shed the amount of load necessary to prevent a system-wide blackout. ERCOT does direct Encore and transmission operators to shed the load because they have the most visibility. They're able to see the grid. If we really start to look at the 2011 event and compare that to what we recently experienced, you'll see that this was 5 times larger than what we experienced then. And to kind of put this in perspective, for the 2011 event that lasted about 7.5 hours, with a total load shed of 4,000 megawatts. Comparison with February 15th, we shed a total load of 20,000 megawatts, and that lasted over 3 days. That just kind of gives an idea of the magnitude of this unprecedented event. The magnitude of the load shed made it impossible to employ limited duration, rotating outages, and reduce enough load to balance the system, and this left some Encore customers without power for an extended amount of time. When we begin to talk about the load shedding and customer impacts, one thing we need to understand is the need for the load shedding and how it impacts customers. The load shedding is necessary to protect the grid from imbalance and lead to blackouts. When we look over in the left-hand side, looking at the overview of the load shedding, you'll see it's simply supply and demand. It's employed by ERCOT and other TDUs, and the overall goal is to restore stability. Again, this is a pre-planned manual process that we review. When we look at what led to the emergency event and the state of the load shedding, what we experienced in February, the amount of load shedding that was requested by ERCOT. We transitioned over to controlled outages that were employed to provide stability. And again, we dealt with winter storm outages to the equipment, as well as extended outage restoration times. So as you can see, that got us to the point of where we were at an emergency state. As I stated earlier, we were able to look at a few things of what basically we just could have done better. And we keep in mind the Texans impacted and the lives lost for this event, as I stated earlier. And we've asked ourselves what operationally we can do better. And I'll read a few points that have been identified. Industry's general approach to managing and responding to load shed events of this magnitude, continued collaboration with gas industry regarding their electrical needs, better understanding priorities of our cities with regard to water systems and facilities, developing analytics, programs, and processes that better help identify other outages occurring during the load shed events, better communication with customers as to new information received from ERCOT, timelines for restoration and changing grid and operational conditions, and also helping customers identify opportunities for reducing load during emergency events, including downtown dimming. Before we start questions, I just, again, want to thank Council for just giving us this opportunity to really just share what we saw and what we've learned. Know that any questions, concerns that come up, we'll definitely communicate that during this process as we begin to just still review our steps. If you have any additional questions, I'm definitely here to help. But I definitely look forward to working with you all going forward the next few years.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There's a lot of detail there. Very much appreciated. Questions? Councilmember Mace.
Thank you, Mayor. It'd be very easy for us to get into telling you how to fix your problems. That's not really our job. I hope and trust that you guys do fix your problems, and we don't want to see this kind of thing happen again. I will tell you what I'm going to focus my comments on is how I experienced the blackout. And it was really from a communication standpoint. It had nothing to do with the lack of power. I understand that was going to happen in hindsight. I mean, I know that we were in an emergency situation. Things were dire. But you even touched on some of the things that were most frustrating to me and my family and the people that have talked to me is we couldn't get communication. When I logged on to your website to report an outage, it would say, go call this number. We'd call the number on the telephone. It'd say, go log into the website. We'd do that. I mean, we did that over and over and over, and we never could get a good answer on what was going on. The other thing that came out of this was there was no clear definition between the difference between a controlled outage and a roving blackout. I may have those words backwards, but there never was. I mean, we were under the mindset that we were under a roving outage and power would be back on in a few minutes, and yet we were without power for 36 hours in a row. Just the communication that that was not true would have significantly impacted the way that we responded. And so the communication to me was critical, and that was where Encore failed. Now we can talk a little bit about ERCOT, which is really kind of a 5-letter word now, but that I hope we solve that one at a higher level. Just specifically, there was a situation where some residents called me and they said, we've been without power for 5 days and we can't get anyone to tell us anything. I called Mike, who called you, and interestingly, they had power back on in a few hours. I don't know what happened to that neighborhood. I don't know what happened, but I think they got lost. And it was on London Way, just for your records. That happened back in 2011, and for some reason, they just don't show up on your screen. So just the communication, I came up with a new word. The mayor is very familiar with truth in lending. This is truth and power. We need better truth and power, and we need better truth and power from you guys. Understood. So please take this very seriously. I'm sure you're addressing, I know that how you operate your generators is way beyond the scope of this group, but it's our citizens that we're concerned with, and that's where the communication starts and ends, and that's what has to be 100% accurate. And unfortunately, right now, it's not. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Councilmember Hinojosa Smith.
Keita, thank you for being here. I think that I'm sure that you, Encore, everybody you work with has heard nothing but complaints about everything that happened. I was living it as well. I was in constant communication with you, and I know that so many people were without power. They suffered in many different ways, and I hate that we went through that experience. But if anything, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate the fact that there's obviously ways to do things better. You guys are looking into that. You're outlining, what you see as the issues. Personally, thank you for answering every single text and every single phone call that I made to you, where many times all you could say to me is, we're having to cut more load. And that's what you're getting. And really, you were just trying to do your part, but at least I knew that I could then give information to the citizens that were asking me questions. You were in constant communication with Mike and our staff. And I appreciate the fact that, you were doing what you could do on your side, and you were providing us whatever information you could. I think, as Councilmember May said, I think there's a lot of learning opportunity. We never want to have to go through this again. I think there were just so many different factors that played in, but I'm not here to point fingers, other than I'm glad that y'all have identified problems. You've identified opportunities to make things better. I hope we don't have to go through something like this again. And if anything, I just want to say thank you for your transparency, your honesty, for being here, and again, for the open lines of communication.
Thank you.
Councilmember Matthew.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for being here today. I have two questions. I will wait for your response for the first one, then I'll ask the follow-up question. The fire chief, Kevin Richardson, came to us and did a presentation to us and said he lost the power in fire station. Do you know what happened?
During the load shedding event? Yes, sir. As I mentioned earlier, there were some fire stations that were actually included and were not excluded from the load shedding event. I can say that specifically probably was the situation there.
So have you updated the map that this won't happen to fire stations, police departments? And you mentioned 911 and hospital were exempt, but about police stations and fire departments?
Yes, sir. From my understanding, we are reviewing how we will really approach those critical loads in case of the situation, especially when it comes to water treatment and waste facility plants that we need to really focus on. So we have identified some areas where we're going to make sure that we can do that. I can't guarantee or say specifically now that all fire stations would be excluded from a load shedding event, but what we are doing is making sure that we're reviewing all of our critical load lists for each city now and plan to have a plan in place for sure.
Thank you. My second question is, do you have an updated map that you can provide to the Coppell citizens or websites where the reason I'm asking this question is there were some people in Coppell never lost power. Mm-hmm. And some people lost, West just said, council member West said, 5 days. So do you have a map that we can see why one section of the city lost 5 days, one section of the city did not lose power at all?
Unfortunately, we're not able to release that information, primarily for security reasons. We really don't want to show where all of our facilities are located and release that information. But I do know that, again, twice a year, and we do have a team that reviews where all of these locations, when we start to speak about the under-frequency relays, they review that annually. That gets really more technical than what they pay me for, but I know that they review that, and there are some chances where it could change. It just depends on what they have really behind the scenes.
Thank you.
Councilmember John.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'll echo with what Councilmember Brianna also said about, I know that you guys were in a tough situation and trying to correct all the things that's been going on. But at the same time, I know all of us were frustrated, and, in a situation like that, there's no real, answer to a lot of things that's been going on. 3 things I do want to ask you is, you did say that you sent an email today to all of us, or was it to a particular? Okay, because I didn't see in mine, so I just wanted to make sure that I'm not missing, but I didn't see it in mine.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure on that one. Number 2 is, you talked about how you guys learned from this situation. Is ERCOT actively listening to you guys as to the input and what you've learned and what to do moving forward?
I believe that when we had those Senate hearings and House hearings, our CEO was able to testify on really what we experienced. And I know ERCOT also did the same thing as far as testifying. I can't speak to specifics as far as what the communication is happening, but I know that those conversations have been going on for the past pretty much a month and a half to 2 months.
Okay. And then the third thing is going off similar to what Councilmember Matthew was talking about, which I had asked our city manager, was, identifying some of the people that actually had the power on that might be on the same critical load. In fact, my partner across the street, he said he never lost power. And the reason why I was asking that question was, as even through the events like that, we had Coppell citizens were really great, and they were actually willing to help out those that actually lost, power for a long period of time. But if we are able to identify some of those houses, I'm sure a lot of them even be willing to, form some sort of a emergency response where they could even, provide some sort of a, whether it be sheltering or allowing them to be able to cook something, for the matter. So that's the reason why we're trying to see if that's possible to identify those locations for future references in case if something like this happened, that the citizens they could come together and try to assist those, especially those that the seniors that lost power, but they're not able to do a lot of things that younger folks were able to do. So those are the concerns, and that's the reason why we're asking about identifying some of the areas that are on the same critical power load.
Understood. And again, the PUC really doesn't allow us even to release additional information per customers. So we are very limited on what we can provide to cities when it comes to identifying where those under-frequency relays or specific feeders that were not impacted. But I can see what information I can provide to you, but I'm just being upfront and transparent again as possible of what we're regulated by the PUC what we can and can't release as well.
Yeah, if you could look into that and give us a feedback, that would be great, because
Yes, sir.
that brought us, or in my thinking, that we could also have citizens emergency response team that could help fellow citizens in need. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Hinojosa.
Thank you. Sorry. Akita, I guess my question to you is there anything that we can do in our capacity as city council, mayor, staff, to help in making sure this doesn't happen again, right? Or in being a part of the solution? I don't know if there's an answer to that, or if there isn't, is just to give some thought.
I don't know if there's a direct answer. I think this is a first start of allowing Encore to come and you ask all the questions that you need to and allow us to really present what we found and what we realized and what we need to work on. Again, like I spoke to earlier, it speaks to the leadership of Coppell, because I know that a lot of that information was getting out to some residents, how limited it may have been. So I think as long as we continue to have that working relationship, open lines of communication, allow me to do my job as your area manager and ensure that I provide you with as much information as possible. Again, going to the recent communication I sent out about conserving energy, if we can find any way to ensure that we get that out to residents so that we don't have a situation like we went through before and everybody really responds to that, I think that's a first start for all of us.
Thank you. And I do appreciate the time and the effort here. Mr. Land?
Sure. Thank you. Keita, appreciate you being here this evening. I know we did have a lot of conversations, and I just wanted, because I know you may have some folks from Encore listening in as well, but my compliments to you as we were going through that process. I know that Kent was in conversation with you as well, that any time that we did have a real critical, very critical situation, you were right on top of it and responded quickly, and Encore responded very quickly. And to you and Encore, thank you for your help in getting us through that. Y'all and Dallas Water Utilities just really stepped up when things were going to heck, and just really appreciate that as well. Yeah, we had challenges, communication. You and I had a really frank conversation about how the communication plans that Encore had were not doing you any justice at all and not helping your case. So yes, we did have those conversations, but at the end of the day, when we had to make the call, you were extremely responsive. Encore was extremely responsive, and we just really appreciate that, because our citizens, quite frankly, we were able not to have to get into a boil water situation or get it, to compound on top of, other problems. So I just want to say thank you personally for your help and Encore's help in saving our bacon.
Thank you. And again, you all have my contact information if there's any time, even in the middle of a storm. I'm pretty much up 24 hours. So I'm always a call, a text message, an email away to provide as much information as I can to help you guys.
Again, thank you very much for being here. I know that you are doing this to several cities, but it cannot be one of those things that you were looking forward to. So we do appreciate the information and the putting the face with the name and making sure that we can contact you in the future will be best for all of us, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you, and I'll follow up with the answers to your questions as well. Thank you all.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. These items are routine in nature, and they are being, full descriptions are available on the screen. These items have been previously approved either through budget or past council actions. Any item may be pulled and considered separately. Tonight, we are going to pull item B to be considered separately. As the mayor will have to, or has submitted a conflict of interest affidavit. So I would put items A through F, or I'm sorry, A, C, D, E, and F for your consideration. Any questions or comments? None. Councilmember Mays.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve consent agenda items 8A and 8C through F.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Long. All in favor?
Long, Hinojosa Smith, Mays, Roden, John, Matthew, in favor. None opposed. Motion carried.
And I will turn the meeting over to Councilmember Roden.
Thank you, Mayor. So we have then before us item 8, consent agenda item B. Any discussion or motion?
Move to approve consent agenda item 8B.
Is there a second? Councilmember John. All in favor?
Long, Hinojosa Smith, Mays, Roden, John, Matthew, in favor. None opposed. Motion carries.
Great, thank you. I survived.
Thank you very much. We will now move to item 9, which is a public hearing, so I'll open the public hearing. Consider approval of a zoning change request from PD 280R to PD 280R retail to approve a detailed site plan for the improved lift station on 0.725 acres of land located on the south side of Sandy Lake Road, approximately 1,100 feet east of MacArthur Boulevard. And we have Mary Perrone Boswell here to walk us through this item. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here this evening to discuss the lift station located on the south side of Sandy Lake Road, approximately 1,100 feet east of MacArthur Boulevard. This property has had a lift station on it for close to 50 years. In 2015, a plan development was approved to allow for a cell tower to be placed on the site. Just after the approval, the site was impacted by a severe flood, and the cell tower was never constructed. I just want to emphasize that what is before you this evening is to update the zoning on the property to allow for the upgrade of the lift station. Engineering has presented the project in prior council work sessions. The design contract was awarded by City Council in February 2020. Engineering staff will be preparing the bid package for this project and will be back in front of City Council in the next couple of months to discuss the project itself in more detail and to award the bid for construction. Construction for this project is tentatively scheduled for the latter part of this year. Again, tonight's discussion is only to update the zoning on the site to allow for the upgrade of the lift station. So the lift station is located on a panhandle lot nestled between Universal Academy to the west and St. Joseph Retirement Village to the east. The Universal Academy building partially screens a good portion of the site. So as you can see, it's located with the star on there on the left-hand side. It provides service to approximately 23% of the city. The sanitary sewer lift station was originally constructed on this property in 1975 and modified in 2004. It's a dry pit lift station which pumps wastewater from a lower elevation to a higher elevation through a 20-inch force main. This process will improve the site and provide for a new lift station. The existing lift station will be demolished and abandoned in place once the new station is online. So the site is accessed from Sandy Lake Road from mutual access easement with Universal Academy. The existing lift station has a gravel driving surface. The existing lift station will be demolished and abandoned in place once the new lift station is online. So that was identified in blue. The new lift station will have a firm capacity of 6.9 million gallons per day. The upgraded lift station will include a new concrete paving throughout the site where gravel currently exists. The existing chain link fence at the entrance of the site will be replaced with an 8-foot wrought iron fence with swinging gates. A new electrical building, emergency generator, and odor control system will be positioned along the southwest side of the site and will be screened from view both from the existing screening wall and the Universal Academy building itself. In terms of landscaping, there are no proposed landscaping changes to be done on the property other than replacing grass that may be disturbed during construction. The new lift station building will be a prefabricated building with a split face block relief textured pattern and sandy beige in color. The building is approximately 11.5 feet by 25.5 feet in size and 12 feet in height. The carport structure image on the bottom red box is for illustrative purposes only. It represents the shade structure that will be placed over the odor control system. It's a metal shade structure meant to provide protection from the elements for the odor control system. There is no covered parking proposed for this site. This slide just represents the details of the fencing material for the gates. So state law requires that we send out letters to property owners within 200 feet. There were 6 letters sent out. In addition, we go above and beyond and sent out courtesy letters to property owners within 800 feet, which was an additional 44 letters. We also put out a zoning change sign on the property with a phone number for people to call in case they have any questions. We did receive 1 letter in favor from Wellington Place Apartments located at 230 South MacArthur Boulevard. Basically just saying that, yes, we do need this. We did receive 2 phone calls, but those are just questions asking if it was about Universal Academy, because the lift station is tucked in behind, so it's a little bit hard to see from the road. So the Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval of this request, subject to the following conditions: that there may be additional comments at the time of building permit and detailed engineering review. Again, I just want to re-emphasize that what is before you this evening is to update the zoning on the property to allow for the upgrade of the lift station. Particulars about the construction and operation of the lift station will be coming before City Council in the next few months. This is the end of my presentation, and I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Did anyone sign up to speak on this? No one has signed up to speak, so I'll turn it over to council for any questions or comments. Councilmember Roden.
Thank you. I appreciate the presentation. When we did the development of St. Joseph Village there was an elevation difference between St. Joseph and this property. I guess my only concern is to make sure that this carport structure over the odor control area is not readily evident to the residents at St. Joseph. I know we asked for objections and did not receive any, but I'm afraid we'll get objections after the fact if the line of sight is not right. Have y'all looked into that?
We could definitely look into that to make sure that it's not visible.
I think we need to, as good neighbors, just to take a look at that to make sure that, and if not, maybe there's some soft screening or something, just trying to prevent a problem before it happens.
Yes, sir. We'll take a look at that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Matthew.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to follow up with the Councilmember Gary Gordon. Did we inform the Universal Academy about these changes?
Yes, sir. So they did get letters because they are property owners within 200 feet. And in talking with engineering staff, they did coordinate with them at the beginning of the project, and they will be coordinating with them for the construction portion as well.
Are they in favor or in opposition?
I did not receive any commentary on that, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Mays.
Have we received, over the course of having this lift station in this area, have we received any odor complaints about it from any of the residents, either in St. Joseph's or Wellington Apartments or Universal Academy?
I would have to defer to engineering on that. I'm sorry.
I was afraid I was going down that path, but that was the question when we started talking about the zoning that came up.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, Council. Thank you. We have not received complaints in that area in some time, been several years since we received complaints. We did replace odor control units several years ago, and we believe the new units that we have in there with the filters that we have has resolved that issue.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Judd.
Thank you, Mayor. I know you mentioned that this is just a consideration for the zoning change or approval, but I just had a couple of questions, and I don't know if you have it or not, but if not, it'll be next time you could bring it up, but bring it to us. But what did you talked about in 2004, the modification took place, but do you know what that entailed?
Mr. Garza, you're getting your work.
I knew I should have stayed up here. Yes, so we made some changes to some valves, some piping, some minor modifications to the building, some internal panel controls, that sort of thing, to bring it up to date. At that time, that was 15 years ago or so.
And at that time, I mean, what was the cost of that modification at the time?
I'll be honest, I don't know off the top of my head, but I'd have to find that out and get back to you on that one.
And at the time when we're doing modification, did we have an idea that this lift station remodeling, I guess, in a way, did we have this idea in mind that it's going to take place?
Yes, sir.
But was there a reason why? I'm trying to understand, why it wasn't done at that time, or it wasn't considered at that time.
So we've been looking at this lift station for the last 15 plus years to get it replaced. We've done what we can in the meantime to maintain it, to extend its life. The lives of lift stations are about 30 plus years. This one's been here for 50 years, so we've been working on putting a plan in place to replace this lift station.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion. Councilmember Mays.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to close the public hearing and approve item number 9.
Second by Councilmember Roden. All in favor?
Long, Hinojosa, Smith, Mays, Roden, Jund, Matthew in favor, none opposed. The motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 10, City Manager's Reports, Updates and Future Agendas, and Update on the Legislature, or the 87th Legislature. Blech.
Mayor, I'll let you take one of those. Yes, I will. Just an update on some projects. The first concrete pour on Airline Drive was at the end of last week, so progress being made there. On Cambria, there was a neighborhood meeting within the last few weeks. 20 residents showed up. Feedback was positive, looking forward to the project being done and looking forward to the improvements. The alley contractor is mobilizing and should be starting work within the next couple of weeks. Just as a heads up, interestingly enough, there appears to be at least the rumored is that there is a cement shortage. So that may affect some of the schedules that we have going on, and so just be aware of that. Councilman Long, Grapevine Springs Park.
You're going to say something?
Yes, I am. I know it's been a long time coming. Bidding starts this week, and so we should have something to the council here within the next month or so on the dredging and the wall repairs. And remember, this is a project that we're working with Dallas County on, that they're splitting some of the cost with us. So progress is being made there. It looks like, I think I wrote down May 6th as far as the bid openings. So progress is being made there. Regarding the 87th legislature, there are only really two things I want to talk about, and really I would like to defer to the council, to the mayor on one. But SB 10 did get voted out of the committee. That is the lobbying bill. There was a substitute bill that was introduced, and we continue to monitor it. Right now, interestingly enough, they at least wrote some excluding language that said that, guess what? We can still be a member of TML. There's a surprise. And the North Texas Commission, but they can't hire lobbyists. So in terms of the funding, so it's just really a crazy process. I say that bill, it's really hard to understand in terms of what's being said, but at least on the Senate side, it's come out of committee. And right, there are a lot of bills, and I appreciate we have a citizen in town that has been watching a couple of bills and getting us information, and we really appreciate, and we've been telling him that we appreciate him looking out after that particular bill. So we're in contact with that, and we're following up on that. And there's a lot of things, as we all know, there are a lot of bills that get introduced, and there are a lot of bills that go to committee, and there's a lot of bills that just sit, right? And then there's a lot of bills that don't necessarily have support on the floor. And so we constantly monitor that. In particular, the one that I want to talk about now is HB 4072, and that's the destination bill. The mayor and I did go to Austin last week to testify for the bill, and I really do want to defer. The mayor did a phenomenal job. The way it broke down is the committee hearing started at 10 a.m. It's on video if you want to watch it. And I guess it was about 12:30, they finally got around to HB 4072. And HB 4072 is the chairman's bill, Morgan Meyer, who's from University Park and represents University Park, Highland Park, and parts of Dallas. And the bill basically is the destination bill that's in support of the rule that the comptroller adopted. And the reason I say it that way is because there was actually acknowledgement that the rule was adopted without the legislative support. So that was pretty interesting to hear that day. There were several members. Ellie came from the chamber and did a phenomenal job representing the interests of small business. So she really stayed focused on that. And there was a couple of other chambers that spoke as well. We knew that someone else was going to be there, but their son had an accident and wasn't able to attend, but we got to see a picture of him in a wheelchair. He's doing fine now, right? Is that okay? Very good. But anyway, and there were several cities that were there present to make presentations about either for or against the bill. What was really interesting is the chair has a philosophy, and his philosophy is that it's kind of that taxation without representation issue, talking about when you go shopping that the tax dollars, and this was the way he used the words, should follow you, which is problematic in and of itself, if you remember. There was a lot of information that was just not correct that was shared during the course of the testimony that was given. And the time frame, by starting at 12:30, they had to break by 2 o'clock. I'm probably giving you way more information, but they had to break by 2 o'clock, so about 1:50 they stopped. The mayor, fortunately, was able to give her testimony before they took their break, and the mayor, while treated respectfully, she did get peppered with a few questions. And so, Mayor, I'd like to let you kind of take it from there, and I'll close it out.
Our testimony was basically why now and why this, and there was really no specific answer given, and it was really kind of a banter back and forth. And there are times, and I think there are times that cities just feel that we are piled on. There are almost 7,000 bills, 6,900 or so bills that were filed this year, and over 2,600 of them will affect cities in one way or another. And yet, on one of the bills that you just talked about, SB 10 does not want the senators and the representatives do not want the cities to be represented in any way. And so it was very difficult because that one was going on the same day. So just feeling piled on. It was totally unsatisfying.
Mm-hmm.
In so much so that by the time Mr. Land did his presentation, I think he changed his whole plan of attack. So I was specifically talking about the fact that the people sitting up here have full-time jobs, and we are tasked with running the city, and not being able to have experts to be able to let us know how the system works down there and how to get things done and who to talk to and how to get, their idea is you should talk to your representative and your senator, and they should be advocating for you. And if that happened, then that might be something wonderful, but they are also doing their own thing. So, very frustrating. And in the end, it was, I have a different opinion. And I respect that you have a different one.
Yeah, when the chairman introduced the bill, the mayor and I, because they had social distancing and everything, but anyway, the mayor and I were sitting next to each other. And the chair actually read into the record that everything about Rule 334. So it had nothing to do with destination. It had everything to do with Rule 334, and that was the justification for the bill that was being introduced. Mm-hmm. So that's what I mean by the setup was really interesting as far as how it goes. Then during the course of the discussion, what was interesting talking about lobbying, one of the cities, Longview, just had the governor announce, and they recently announced that they had signed they had announced an e-commerce deal with Gap. I guess it's called Gap E. It's the Gap, their e-commerce center. It's about 1 million square feet to locate in Longview. And one of the representatives, because this person was saying that they weren't familiar with the rule. And if you remember, Mayor, the response from one of the committee members was, well, how could you not be familiar with the rule? Don't you have somebody here in Austin representing you that looks out after these things? And it's like, what? I mean, yeah, it's almost comical and sad all at the same time, right, in terms of what's going on. And so when the mayor mentioned the idea about piling on, what had happened earlier in the day were the police defunding bills. And so we had signed up to speak in opposition to the 4 bills that were being heard that day. And because they're quite frankly, one of the bills, and the reason we were signing up is because of Rule 334, right? Our sales tax was going to be reduced, and the way those bills work, they would have compared this year's budget to what we proposed next year. And if we lowered by either the number of positions or the total dollar value that went to police department, and they talk about in total, that one of the bills would penalize us 150%. So whatever we reduced the budget, they would hold back sales tax to the tune of 150%. If I had applied that to this year, as far as if the rule were in place, based on what we reduced the police department through crime control and in the police department, that would have added up to almost $2.8 million more that would have been withheld from the city of Coppell because of the implementation of the rule and the way it would have worked. So we were prepared to speak in opposition using just a prime example of something that was completely out of our control and how that would happen. So when we signed up to speak, that's what the bills were. The chair introduced the first bill. He had a substitute, and in the substitute that they had created a bracket that this would only apply to cities of 250,000 or more, and they had identified only 19 cities in the state of Texas that would impact. There were a couple other conditions as well. But the way it works, in case you ever want to go down to Austin, is because we had signed up to speak, we actually have to go up and we have to say that we are now speaking on the bill as opposed to opposed to the bill. So there's a little process you have to go through. So if you can imagine the comedy of the mayor and I getting called up every time and having to say for each one of those bills that we're speaking on the bill. The problem is, on the third bill, she hadn't got the substitute in yet, so the bill that was before them had some of these penalty clauses, so we actually had to give testimony in opposition to a bill that we know that was going to be bracketed.
But that allowed us to actually give our testimony.
That's right. And we got asked the question about why, well, I got asked the question, well, okay, given that you're speaking on, why were you going to be speaking against these bills? So that gave me an opportunity to talk about the impact of the rule on what was happening. So again, to go forward from in the mayor's presentation, so we had the break, we went to lunch, and we started talking about my testimony, and it was like, well, my testimony is not going to go anywhere at all because of the way that the chairman was conducting the meeting. And some of the people that were there were paying attention. I say that because not everybody was at the meeting for the membership. Somehow it worked out where Kerry Barton from the comptroller's office actually spoke before I did, and he was brought up as a rebuttal to everything that was said prior to me speaking about everybody who was speaking in opposition. At one point, which is really odd, at one point the chair actually started defending the comptroller's office. So it was just, you could tell where this was going, right, in terms of, A, not paying attention or not caring, or it didn't really matter. Thank you, we appreciate it. And so after Kerry spoke, the chair, they said he was going to be the last speaker, and so we had to quickly, I had signed up, so I had to raise my hand. It's like that little kid in the back of the room, right? It's like, well, I'd like to come and speak. Gave my testimony and closed the testimony with, it didn't give me any pleasure to have to come up here and speak against the chairman's bill, because that's not a great place to be, because when it's the chairman's bill, the high likelihood it's going to go through. But the impact on the city of Coppell, is just too big, and we have to fight for this. And we have to fight for our citizens, and we have to fight for our businesses. And the chair didn't even bother to really go through his philosophical difference. He said, you're absolutely right. You have to be here speaking against it, and we appreciate you sticking it out with us. And so it was a long day. We gave the testimony. I can tell you that as of this afternoon, it still has not come out of committee yet. So it hasn't been voted on. This Thursday, it was supposed to come up, and it was skipped on Monday, and it's supposed to come up again this Thursday. What we are hearing, so again, I've had a conversation with Chris Wallace with the North Texas Commission and with Ellie this afternoon. What we are hearing is what's gaining traction is that the business community is starting to ask questions. And that's one of the points that we made in our testimony, is that throughout this process, the Rule 334 and even here, this quite frankly is being presented under the rug. It's not being, advertised as part of a change, because for the business communities, so here's a little statistic, there's over 600,000 businesses that register only one place of business out of the 800 and some odd thousand businesses registered to pay sales tax in the state of Texas. So we've done some research, and based on that research, it's going to cost a small business, let's just say, from an accounting software standpoint, and from just doing some general accounting, around $1,200 a year just to manage that at a minimum based on the information that we provided. Well, that adds up to over $700 and some odd million a year that business community is going to have to shell out to do this destination change. So we're getting that information out, and it's not just us. There's other people doing it as well, and that seems to be gaining some traction. So if you happen to have connections with small business owners and they don't necessarily know about this particular rule, please inform them and ask them to call their state representative. And that's one way to gain traction to say, hey, what's going on? The other thing is there's been absolutely no analysis done on 4072. So they haven't done any research. What they contend is, and we heard over and over again from the chairman, is that they held a public hearing. And that is the extent of the research that was done related to House Bill 4072. So when I was asked about how I feel, I was telling the mayor about this while I was driving home Wednesday night, I guess it was, or Tuesday night. When I was asked how I feel about it all, I said, hope is not a strategy, but hope's something that I've got still, that something will work. But after Tuesday, I said, the story of Abraham and Isaac going up to the altar and being led to the sacrifice. That's actually how it really felt, going through that process on Tuesday. But you know what? You got to have faith. And the fact that this thing is starting to gain a little bit of traction gives me a little bit more hope and a little bit more faith that we can slow roll this situation. So that gives you an idea of what's happening and what's reaching out. Those are, I would say, clearly the most important thing that I've been spending my time on is 4072 and trying to coordinate, some information that'll go out. When we get the green light, we're ready to go to send that information out. But right now, we're really concentrating on the business community and the chambers of commerce. And in talking with Ellie today, for example, the Lake Houston Chamber of Commerce sent out a I guess it's a listserv for chambers, about 300 members. The Round Rock is doing the same. Ellie's going to, if she hadn't done it tonight, she'll be doing, from what I understand, pretty much that same list that she'll be getting out, plus there's some others. Right now, the Texas Association of Business and the NFIB, the National Federation of Independent Businesses, has stayed somewhat neutral on the issue for whatever reason. It's politics, right, in terms of what's going on. But if we can get those two behind us as well, as far as the impact on the business community. What we've heard is that since there is no plan, because there's absolutely no plan behind this, what we've heard that is causing some consternation too for some folks who sit on the committee. Because quite frankly, if you think about it, small businesses and or the cities, since it's being done pretty much under the radar, can you imagine going into the summer and not having an idea that if destination goes into effect in September of 2021 now, that's when the bill would go into effect, the impact on various budgets. Yes, using the terminology, some cities were going to be winners, and some of them might be big winners, and I don't know what the scale of the big winner is, but there are definitely cities like Coppell, nobody at our size in terms of the loss, but there are cities that may be losing $6 to $9 million themselves just based on the deals. One of the questions that came up is, well, but aren't you going to gain? Great. Show me what that is. The comptroller can't do it because he didn't do any analysis, right? So I had one at the end of the day when it was asked, well, Mike, isn't Coppell going to be a gain? And my comment was, we may be. Nobody's shown us anything to what it's going to be, but I can tell you what the loss is going to be because I can measure it. And because I can measure it, I can tell you that it would take 24 Walmarts in Coppell to make up the sales tax difference. It would take $5 billion in new value to make up the difference of what we were going to be losing in sales tax. That's not going to happen. So no, we're not going to make up that much of a difference, right, in terms of what's going on. And you could see everybody's head kind of dropping a little bit as, I'm not lecturing, I'm just telling you that's the way it goes, the way it happens. So that is how our day was spent in Austin, Texas last Tuesday. Mayor, that's all I have.
It's quite enough. Thank you very much. That's kind of a downer, and I'm sorry about that, but it's reality, and we're working through it, and hopefully there will be a good outcome. That's what we're hoping. Any questions for the city manager? Oh, John? I'm sorry, Councilmember John.
No, it's okay. Thank you, Mayor. So since that time, I know initially some of the cities were reluctant on getting on board with fighting this. Has anything changed since that time?
Not really. From a city's perspective, there were, because only a handful of cities are even aware, those cities are still in opposition to your point. It's a small group of cities, like Lancaster, as an example. And, if you've been following the news, Lancaster's been what Coppell is today, go back about 10 or 15 years. That's what Lancaster's going through. And they did come and speak about the fact that, from a sheer equity standpoint, we're finally getting the growth. We're finally getting the 1 million square feet. They just signed a deal with Walmart, I guess it was, right? And so that resonates a little bit, but there's this idea somehow or another that this is going to be a godsend as far as sales tax to the rural communities. This is where the politics comes in. But you know what? They're already receiving remote sales and they're receiving the marketplace sales. So it's not really going to make that much of a difference. Where it could make a difference is someplace like Austin, San Antonio, places that are oil and gas heavy are actually going to lose because think about it, all that inventory is going out into non-areas. And we did raise the point, thank you for asking this question in a different way, but we did raise the point, which in the comptroller's fiscal note actually says that there's no impact on the state and there's no impact on municipalities. It states it in a different way, but that's basically what it says. Well, we were able to give testimony that roughly 16 to 20% of the population lives in unincorporated area, and that about 21% of the businesses that are registered that pay sales tax are actually in unincorporated areas. So for out of roughly $9.2 billion, about 20% of that is going to be no longer collected. So for the state, they'll actually collect less money on that 2% administrative fee. So the fiscal note is factually wrong. But guess what? The comptroller wrote it, so it's okay.
Doesn't the comptroller, when it gets issued from committee, though, have to review their fiscal note or not?
They're the one that wrote the fiscal note.
Right.
But no, we've reached out to them to let them know the error of their ways, and they say, well, just take it up with the committee.
Because oftentimes the bill gets adjusted in committee, and so then the comptroller has to review that and then reissue their fiscal note, but you don't think that's
not what's going to happen here.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you for your passion. I really do appreciate all that you've done. Item 11, Mayor and Council reports. For all of you who are excited about the fact that the council is about to start the budget process for the summer, please make a note that this Thursday, April 15th at 6 p.m. here in council chambers, you can join the city council and staff as they discuss a new 5-year forecast, which I've always hated that name because this is a tool that we use at the beginning of budgeting to help understand where we are going. So it's not really forecasting what we hope is going to happen in 5 years, but it does do some of that forecasting. But this workshop will be an opportunity to learn how to read the new document, which lays out the foundations for the budget process. So again, Thursday night here at 6 p.m. And you can also watch it live stream at www.coppelltx.gov. Early voting starts Monday, April 19th, and goes through the 27th for the general, municipal general and special election. Early voting by personal appearance is available for Dallas County residents at Coppell Town Center. Coppell residents who live in Denton can vote anywhere in Denton County during early voting. On Election Day, Dallas County residents can vote at Coppell Town Center, and Denton County residents will vote at Victorious Life Church at 2671 MacArthur Boulevard, Louisville, 75067. All of this information and more can be found on the City Secretary's election page at coppelltx.gov/elections. And then on Saturday, April 24th, that's a week from Saturday, have your documents safely shredded and recycled by ProShred. Bring up to 4 boxes, the size of banker boxes, which is 9 inches by 12 inches by 17, to the Coppell Service Center on South Coppell Road, which is 816 South Coppell Road, between the hours of 8 a.m. and noon. All shredded papers will be recycled, and your containers will be returned to you, to your trunk or your back seat. Residents are encouraged to come early to ensure there is space in the truck for their documents. And again, that's Saturday, April 24th. Any other upcoming events? Hearing none. Item 12 is public service announcements concerning items of community interest with no council action. Any public service announcements? Councilmember Mays.
Thank you, Mayor. For the last 12 months, vehicle registrations and license renewals have been waived. That exemption ends tomorrow. So if you have not renewed your license or registration, tomorrow is your last day to get that taken care of. And please take care of it before the police find you.
That is a great public service announcement. Any others? Councilmember Long.
On Saturday evening, probably 8 o'clock, there is entertainment at the Art Center this Saturday. A quartet of ladies will be the entertainment. Sort of a country and western, I hear. I'm not familiar with them, but that's kind of the genre, I think.
Okay. So go to the Coppell Art Center website.
Yes, and get your tickets because it's. I think they're only $15. I think that's right.
If you haven't had a chance to go to that facility, you will be amazed at the quality of the acoustics. So, and that's 8 p.m. on Saturday. Okay. Do you have details, Mr. Long?
It's called Farewell Angelina. Okay.
Okay. Okay. We will recess from the regular session, and we will be going to executive session. We did work session first, regular session. Now we will be going into executive session, and we'll be returning in a while. Time is 8:56. Thank you. And every time you picked a time, it was always, it was the kiss of death, and we were here for much longer than what you had anticipated. Okay, we adjourned. Well, we went into executive session at 8:59, and we adjourned from executive session at 10:13. So we will reconvene into regular session. And item 13 is necessary action from executive session. And I will call on Councilmember Roden.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to extend the city manager's contract through September 2023 and provide for a 3% increase in current base salary of the city manager effective October 1st, 2021, and provide for a $10,000 bonus to be paid as either bonus or deferred compensation as selected by the city manager.
Thank you very much. Is there a second by Councilmember Hinojosa Smith? All in favor?
Long, Hinojosa Smith, Mays, Roden, Junt, Matthew in favor, none opposed. The motion carries.
Very much. And there being no other business before us, we are adjourned at 10:16. Thank you very much.